important people join conversations. I welcome it. So a pleasant good afternoon, colleagues, and welcome to another session of Caribbean Technology Thought Leadership, where we discuss salient issues at the time relating to technology and how it impacts our space here in the Caribbean. And usually it's a team of us at different points in time discussing different topics. Some of us discussing more topics than less of some of the topics, but I sincerely welcome us all. These sessions, I should tell you, are recorded. They are actually uploaded as podcast presentations at the University of Technology Jamaica site. They are available to the public. And so hence, my encouragement is that I ask persons for their permissions to be recorded on these sessions, and people will provide feedback usually at the end of the podcast about certain topics and themes. I will have a session one weekend where I will have a collation of those points and share them with our team as like a recap or a throwback segment. We'll have one of those segments. But this evening in particular, we will be addressing a very important topic, and that topic is, as you see on my deck. So let me make sure before I jump in. Is everyone seeing my screen? Are you seeing my deck? Just to be clear, everyone is seeing my deck? Yeah. And there's no, I hope there's no noise disturbances anywhere. I just hope that you're hearing me well for the session. So good afternoon again. My co-host on the session this evening is Dr. Arnett Campbell, and the subject of the conversation is Uber in the Caribbean, technology disruption for the transportation sector. A week ago, Uber, I would say, moved to Jamaica, and my other colleague who will join soon, Mr. Trevor Forrest, we had jointly sent out an article through the Gleaner on some of the thoughts relating to Uber's coming to Jamaica. But we decided this week we will have a session specifically focused on not just Uber, but the whole idea of Uber and other type of mobile ride sharing services and the traditional transportation services that we have in the region. How are we going to be dealing with this technology disruption? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? You know, some people probably might be in the middle of this. As a matter of fact, I had one colleague well established in the local industry here in Jamaica said, Sean, I don't want it here. It is bad for my business. I do not want it. Tell the government to move it out of the country. So I did not respond to my colleague yet immediately. I said, boy, we'll have to do some assessments. So I'm hoping you're seeing my screen. So there are some points for discussion. There are some points for discussion this evening. And I'd like to again welcome all 6 of us on this call. Ms. Joy Watson Mrs. Watson is joining us this afternoon. A pleasant good afternoon, Mrs. Watson.
Good afternoon.
Yes, a pleasant good afternoon. So the whole team is Uber, the adoption of Uber, a source of technology disruption for the region. To put things into perspective, how we treat these sessions is that we have a deck of questions. Let's call it my battle card of questions that I would normally pose to you. And we have a roundtable conversation around it, right? So this evening we have on the call Linkledln from Google. We have Arnett Campbell also here from School of Computing with me. I have Garrett Webb. It's Huawei, as I know it, right? I have Ket Joy, who is a social entrepreneur, and you know, I have a few more persons coming, so it's a good starting panel. So let's jump right into it, and thank you again all for coming. Let me jump right into it. What is meant by mobile ride-sharing services offered offered by companies like Uber. What is this really? Just to get a sense of understanding, what is this big uptick relating to mobile ride sharing services? Because that's what I understand it is. Can I put that to the table? Anybody here can tell me? Linkledln, you're in the valley right now. You know, Uber is taking almost every minute. What is it? Let me ask you, what exactly is mobile ride sharing services like Uber? What does it really mean to take one of these things? Give us a sense of your view on this. Yes.
Yeah. I use Uber all the time actually, so I can give testament to that. So
Yes,
basically, what it comes down to is that as a car owner, you have a car, and you can actually make that car available to other riders. So in other words, I need a ride and you have a car. And what Uber is doing, Uber is like a broker that says, as a rider, you want a ride. And as a driver, you have availability of time and a car, and you can give a ride to that person, basically. In a nutshell, that's what it comes down to. And
right. Okay.
what it means is that, you know, first of all, the response time is much shorter than taxi, because when I call a Uber, sometimes it actually comes before I'm actually ready. So within 5 minutes, you can get a ride. Typically, if you call a taxi, it may take up sometime even half an hour to get a taxi to come to you, if you need, you know. So it actually provides low costs. It provides faster response, and it's actually convenient. And also for the driver, that driver can earn extra income because that driver is not a licensed taxi owner. And so therefore that person could say, okay, I have some time in the evening after work. I want to make some extra money. So I can go out and drive for a few, for a few hours and deliver people. So,
Okay.
right. So what it does is actually.
Oh, so you're saying you who work at Google, you can decide that, after in the evenings, you could just jump in your vehicle and say, let me contribute that to Uber. And you can do that as a job, right?
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Okay.
And a lot of people do that actually. In fact, I met a guy who had a Tesla and he's saying to pay for the Tesla, he actually does the Uber service, in the evening to help make the payments. Yeah. So I think it helps in terms of the economy, in terms of paying, extra income. Some drivers will say, guess what? I don't want to work a full-time job. I want the flexibility of not working full-time. And they become full-time Uber drivers, actually. And so you have that kind of dynamics as well, where you have people who do it full-time and people who do it as a part-time thing. Ultimately, it's disruptive, obviously, because, I remember when I was in Canada as well, the taxi drivers were protesting about Uber and all that stuff, because a taxi license is like $100,000. It's a lot of money to get a taxi license. And so you have this person who is not a taxi. He doesn't have to pay any license. This driver does own a car, sign up to Uber, and he's a taxi in a sense, So it's disruptive in a lot of different ways to a lot of different people. But it's good for the rider, because for the rider, you have availability of different options. You can get a ride fast, that kind of thing,
Thank you for that, Linkledln. I soon get to the arguments of the disruption. I like what you just said about what happened in Canada. I didn't even take note of that there was public disruption in Canada. As I go around this room, I really want to sort of get different opinions. But this first question, seeing that Uber is just coming to Jamaica, I'm going to start with some of the persons who are abroad in the room who would take Uber services. So let me offer a special welcome to Mr. Sean Watson, right, from Heart Trust. Thank you for joining. And Geoff Wallington, who is the CEO and COO of Real Decor, who I think at this time probably is in Canada. Linkledln, you're at Google, and I think Geoff is out there in somewhere in Toronto or somewhere nearby. He can probably tell me as he's on the call. Mobile ride sharing services, Geoff. Let me just jump and ask you, and then I'll go to Art afterwards quickly. You heard what Linkledln just said. It caused public uproar in Canada. What is this mobile ride sharing services? What does it mean to you to have companies like Uber around providing these services? Could I get a Canadian perspective? And that's where I'm inviting you in on this, Geoff. Thank you for joining the session today.
Great, thank you. Yes, I'm up in Ottawa actually at the moment.
You're up in Ottawa.
Yes. So I've seen the contrast between what's available in the different jurisdictions as travel around, and certainly it has made a huge amount of uproar in the early days because there was a established monopoly, right? And the people that were hurt were the people that were effectively who had purchased these plates, effectively the monopoly plates that they have that only allow a certain amount of supply into the marketplace. And they had a huge amount of value, and they would then rent out their plates to other people. So the people that had put the money into that certainly had a huge uproar, and there were a lot of a lot of protests, a lot of problems around that, because there were people whose whole, if you've borrowed against your home to buy these plates, and then suddenly this technology comes in and they're worthless. It was a really big deal for a lot of people, and they had protests. They would block the roads to the airports. They had it was a very big problem for the incumbent providers, but certainly from a consumer perspective, it's added a lot of choice and a lot of options. So we've certainly seen the upside of it. But I think the real question has to be, who are the winners and who are the losers? Certainly consumers are winners. I mean, the technology itself is fantastic for,
Yes.
knowing where things are, every, traveling prior to COVID through, the US or other countries, you use it and you'd always have that availability, and the cost, it has a whole bunch of different programs. So one of the things that was interesting for us was, have a party at work, and you can essentially prepay for people to have Ubers, and they just give them a code, and they can then take an Uber home safely, right? And some of these sort of disruptive things you used to have to do with chits or other ways of doing it, but right now you literally just paste a code into the the party invite, and people can then take Uber home, which is again, it's building on that sort of initial concept they put together, but actually allowing additional innovation on top of it, because it's all digital, because it's all done through the app.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that input, Geoff. So Art, from where you sit, what is this mobile ride sharing service? Linkledln indicated you can use his mobile device. I actually use my laptop or my traditional phone to book an Uber. But what's the context here? What does Uber mean to you in the US right now as a mobile ride sharing service, given the experience of the other two gentlemen?
And I want to say hello to Jeff. I spent some time at Cognos in Ottawa on Riverside Drive. It's been a while since I've been up there.
Wow.
I'm here in North Carolina, in the Wilmington area. So interestingly, I mean, what my colleagues have said, sort of ditto on that. But what I find that's happened, Sean, is it's beyond Uber the name, as in Uber the service, right? Because in New York, where I lived for most of my life, I used a company called Carmel, Carmel, and it's the same exact thing, except Carmel was a traditional limo taxi service. And instead of complaining about Uber, what they did was they simply acquired the commodity, right? Which is the technology as a service. Companies like Jugnoo, Jugnoo, offer an entire Uber type platform. And so what they've decided to do was to offer the same exact service to an already existing customer base. And so I use Carmel when I need to go anywhere. It's the same exact experience. So what I'm saying is it's not Uber the company as in Uber the concept. And I believe that, the technology behind it is a commodity, right, guys? And so nothing is stopping, and I don't want to call the names of the taxi services in Jamaica, but nothing is stopping them from essentially just doing the same thing, right? And the truth is, the disruption, Sean, is not just ride sharing, right? Eventually, there is the opportunity for us to have the equivalent of Uber Eats, right, in Jamaica. We have to go beyond what is seen as just a taxi thing. The idea is, how do you meet the immediacy, the need immediacy of the customer base, right? Because that's the lived experience that we all have, thanks to Amazon and others like them. So is it disruptive? Yes. Should it be welcome? Absolutely. There's going to be an increase in opportunities for persons to start their own business as a result of this.
Yes.
I'm just surprised, again, as I always am, with just the unwillingness to just accept the change and adjust your business. The people who will complain the most are obviously going to be taxi services, right, guys? But if they stop for a second, they could just adopt the concept and just extend their businesses and go out and use the same platform as a service. I've given you one of them, and so maybe that's something you could share with folks, that they could just go on and have their own Uber experience created for their taxi service and get on with it.
Excellent point. So in this podcast, we have had 3 perspectives so far for those who are directly out of country. I'm going to then ask Dr. Campbell, followed by Garrett and Kethjoy and Sean, to just weigh in and give me their views on this, because there's a lot of local discussion going on, about this mobile ride share. I tell you, a lot of discussion going on. I don't think we know where to start or end. But let me ask Dr. Campbell, followed by Garrett, and then Kethjoy and Sean, just to weigh in and give me their own thoughts on this mobile ride sharing services.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I would say that the Uber disruptive technology is a redistribution of how we use technology in terms of the efficiency of how we use our assets. And so think of all the idle assets that have been parked up in various places and the creation of opportunities. So it is for the existing industry, and I share the view of Art and all the other speakers, that what we have to look at, don't fight it, but join the movement and see how we can eke out our own opportunities out of where the technology is leading us.
Are you still there, Sean?
Yes, I'm still here. All right, thank you for that. Thank you for that, Arnett. Thank you for that input. So I throw the deck around. So, and that's a good, for a moment, I thought Dr. Campbell was going to say it's going to redistribute the wealth assets of the country, but nothing short of him saying that. That's something that could come to mind. So let me ask Garrett, from where he sits, what perspective do you have on how this is going to impact the space? More so, you're in the mobile business, you're a telecoms provider, mobile ride sharing in Jamaica. Uber, what's the perspective, Garrett?
All right, so let me just clarify something. I serve the telecoms giants here. I'm not a telecoms provider.
Yes.
But this disruption, I think, in a way, is positive.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I know a lot of persons have been putting around the idea of trying to Uberize some of the local taxi services.
Uberize, is that a new word? Hold on, man, you're putting something in my vocabulary this evening. When you teach an academic a new word, he has to write it down. Uberize, let me take note of that. Continue.
Right. So I know there have been some attempts. I guess the rejection on the part of some of the executives to see a business opportunity has now come back home to haunt them. Now, there are a number of different things to look at, right? There is, for example, certain acts in the law books that speaks to what you need to have. You must have certain type of license, etc., and certification to operate a PPV. Insurance companies, of course, will also have their own viewpoint on how a regular old car with a driver that they don't know much about is certified to carry passengers. What happens if there is an accident? What will the next steps be in terms of claims? That sort of stuff. So there are a whole heap of different things to look at on this. First and foremost, the government should look to see if the introduction of Uber itself as an organization, if they are satisfying the local laws, and they should. If they don't, then the red flag needs to go up and everybody needs to get their ducks lined up and conform. Number two, the use of the technology, I think, is great. The persons who will gain most are the commuters. Now, pretty much 8 out of 10 commuters above a certain age has a phone. Likely that, you know, a good percentage of them have a smartphone. For those persons who are really doing business where time is of the essence and transportation they need to get around, this is a good signal for them. But clearly, as in the case in New York with art, if you had what would have been an established and a legal and a licensed public passenger service adopt the model, the access model and technology, then I'm quite sure they will still retain a significant amount of their customers.
Yep.
Especially if they were able to reduce their rates, because it kind of boils down to the dollar sign. If getting to work and back is $1,500 on a particular taxi service, and an Uber ride takes it down to $500, I'm going to go with Uber if I'm watching my dollars, especially if the response time is the same and the experience is not much different. Hey, I'm just going to go with what it makes better economic sense for me. Right? And of course, you know, in Jamaica, there's a similar process to the Canadian plates. It's called route and road license, where it's a scarce commodity. It's rationed out and there are caps and ceilings there. And persons have invested heavily in this. And yes, I don't know about the renting of these in Jamaica, but they were actually selling them. Persons would, you know, rush, get a road license, and then sell it at twice the price. And there would be people clamoring to buy it, because there was a time when that industry was very lucrative and everybody wanted to be legal so they don't get harassed by transport authority and or the police. So I think we just need to, you know, turn the prism and look at the different facets, the pluses, the minuses, what we need to consider about, you know, the presence of Uber here in terms of regulations, existing businesses, and the commuters. And just look at it from different sides.
Definitely some very good points you hit on there, Garrett, on this mobile ride sharing, and some of them I have to come back to you in a little bit about them. So
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Based on something Garrett said, hey Garrett, how you doing? It's been a while.
Yeah.
It had me thinking, and can we just settle for sure now? Is Uber coming or is Uber there? See,
it's here.
If Uber is already, well, if they're there, then it would presume that all of the qualifications and all of these the hurdles would have been gone over.
I don't know.
Well, hold on. I'm just saying. If we say someone is there doing business, let us at least start on the assumption that they have the legal go ahead to do it, which would therefore suggest that the framework or some kind of framework exists. If they're coming, then that's a whole different discussion.
Yes.
So how do you confirm they're there? Can you get an app now and call Uber and have it show up in front of your house as you're speaking today?
Yes, we can, because I actually saw firsthand from members within the JCS actually booking the Uber on Constant Spring Road, moving from point A to B. As a matter of fact, the very evening it landed, about an hour after it landed, I got a call from the Gleaner, but it was already in use. And the JCS member was actually showing us a live road demonstration from his app on his phone as to how he moved from point A to B in the Constant Spring area. So that is what actually caught my attention the very same evening. And wait, I didn't know this was coming. So it's a very delicate conversation we're going into about rights and regulation. And I've actually asked Trevor to join this meeting with us this evening. And he'll soon be joining, so he probably will give us some insight. Boy, speaks too soon. He's going to live long. He just joined. But definitely a very important point to raise. And this is why we have Caribbean Technology Thought Leadership on a Sunday, where some very informative discussions present themselves. I want to thank all my guests who are here this evening for a riveting conversation so far on where this is going on mobile ride sharing services in Jamaica. So very useful point indeed. But I want to get the views of Sean and Keith also on the call, just about their general thoughts on this mobile ride sharing. And we jump right into the issue of whether or not government and the telecoms providers, etc., the service providers have done the due diligence of how Uber comes into the market, or did they need to? That's another question. So Sean and Kev, in that order, could you share your views on this as I give everyone in the session a chance to just weigh in? I appreciate you coming. And Miss Leslie, I'm seeing you as well. I sure I did. Thank you.
Evening, everyone.
Yes.
Well, I've recently learned about
I think I lost you
Uber
for a
coming
minute,
from
Sean. Sean is from Hard Trust, Jamaica, and he's a security consultant over there. But Sean, go ahead. Go ahead.
Hello, Sean, you here?
Yes, I'm hearing you, but you're just a little bit muffled coming in and out. You could try again.
Connection over here.
We have to deal with digital and flow.
Are you hearing me now?
I'm hearing you, sir. I'm hearing you quite well.
Yeah. Yes, evening again, everyone. Yeah, I was saying that when I first heard about it, I was a little concerned or apprehensive about the idea in terms of well, I was more thinking from a security point of view. From our our culture is that you're jumping on a vehicle with a stranger. But then when you think about that, we do that every other day with robot taxis.
Yes.
But interestingly, I saw a video of this, in fact, it's Kev Joy, who showed me the video of this young lady who demonstrated the ride from Devon House to somewhere of Constant Spring.
Okay.
And basically she interviewed the driver and he was explaining certain aspects of it. And I was saying that, it really makes sense. It's no more risky than a typical robot taxi or any other taxi. Outside of that, I see the users as the winners, which is
as the winners.
And the rates seem to be a little cheaper. So if you think about it, if it's cheaper, most persons will be willing to use it.
I think I should have put that question on the rates. I'll come back to that rates thing later. I need to drop it in somewhere. But thank you for that. The rates are cheaper, you said. All right.
Yeah, well, at least from where she was going from Devon House to Constant Spring. I think it was what, $500. But that route is a little more because she had called another a regular taxi service. I think it was on time.
On time, okay.
And it was about $700 or something like that.
So there are cost savings.
There are cost savings.
Now that is interesting. That is interesting.
For me, I think it's well, the end user will be the winner, of course.
Excellent point.
My other concern would be the laws of the land, because they are, what my understanding, there are laws in place that govern the public transportation. I don't know how that will work out.
Yes. So these are the questions we need to engage. Yes, indeed.
That is my greatest concern.
Concern there. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I don't know if you're speaking because you're both of one bosom or one speaker. But Joy, probably you have a view. Let me have our independent view.
Okay.
Let me get the independent view of the lady on the call. Any thoughts on this?
Yes. Afternoon, everybody.
A pleasant afternoon.
Hi, Kit.
We watched the young ladies, one of these Jamaican YouTubers, who was very enterprising. She called up the Uber from Devon House, and the guy was able to get there within 9 minutes of her call. And while she was waiting those 9 minutes, she called the competitor, and they were $200 more. And so you realize right off the bat that Uber has entered the market space with a very aggressive loss-leading pricing strategy.
With a bang, if you want to say that as a proper word. It's a big bang.
If you're a disruptor, you must disrupt.
Yeah.
And the thing is, 8 days ago, the headlines on the Observer was that Cabinet is discussing the entry of Uber, the entry of Uber while it is running.
I want to come back to that after. This is a good point.
The military is silent and the opposition is vocal because the thing is still soft.
Sorry to interject. This is bringing back memories of cell site erection. Careful. Where cell sites are up and running without approval.
So while they try and work out the legalese, you can get an Uber to anywhere right now. The gentleman in question, the taxi driver, he says he's actually a call center worker on vacation.
Okay. Hold on, I'm learning a lot in the evening here, man. This is Caribbean Technology Thought Leadership. I didn't know this.
Dr. Thorpe, not even 10 years ago, we had a problem in this country where youngsters who are just going into university or of university age who don't have any way of getting to university were challenged to find entry-level jobs. And here is a guy, he's sample number 1, who has an entry-level job at a call center on vacation and he's driving Uber. Talk about the various avenues for income generation outside of the traditional.
Definitely.
And this is what disruptors do.
Definitely. Very good point there.
Autonomy and some amount of power over your own income streams, don't it?
Definitely. This has been.
And we knew they were coming. We were reading about it in the newspaper from last year, and all the leading taxi companies, at least the private taxi companies around, had enough time to set up their own app, had enough time to even merge and put up a viable opposition, maybe a duopoly with Uber. This is a small country now. And what we have lost over the years with the various iterations of taxis. Anybody remember Yellow Cab?
Yes, Yellow Cab, yes.
Is that we have lost loyalty. People don't have any loyalty. They're loyal to their pocket.
That's right.
Get a $200 cheaper ride, I'm taking it. And
definitely.
You see, the thing I noticed also, these leaders, private leaders, they had the information, the marketing information, they know their customers, because there are people who call one specific taxi and they're the designated driver. But they've never called us. We've always called them. So if it was even to garner that support and say, listen, we're making our own app, it's going to be named X, Y, and Z, in preparation for the competition, they couldn't do that. And those same drivers will now have an Uber sticker, have an on-time sticker, have an express sticker on their car.
Yes, indeed. This is very informative. Welcome to Caribbean Technology Thought Leadership. We're talking about Uber this afternoon and its technology disruption to the Jamaican Caribbean market. George, it's some very powerful points you just raised. As usual, we have been doing a good job on this along with, well, I'm not going to say she is the only roses among thorns. I have another lady on the call this evening as well. But it's a very timely input and I appreciate that. I'm learning a lot as your host, I must tell you, because I didn't know it was cheaper. And I didn't know all the things, some of the points you were all raising just now. So I'm writing notes as we speak, colleagues, based on the conversation we are having. Mr. Forrest, and I'm going to come back to you, George. Mr. Forrest joined the call, a special advisor of government in the past and the current CEO of 876 Solutions. We're talking about Uber and the mobile ride sharing services. You and I actually had a joint article in the Gleaner recently, Trevor, but we're having a full conversation this afternoon on it. Mobile ride sharing services for Jamaica. You hear the rest of the panel so far. Any thoughts weighing in on the conversation at this point in time, sir?
Well, yeah, I mean, so a couple of things. Clearly, Uber's MO, as it has always been, is to come in and disrupt the status quo in markets, which is always a good thing.
Yes.
But there are a couple of things that need to be understood as to one, how Uber is doing what it's doing,
yes,
and how sustainable, if at all, it can or will be. Because there are a number of factors that dictate, whether or not Uber will succeed or remain in the market. Because don't forget, Uber has gone to other markets and have
failed,
and has failed, or has come under a lot of,
namely Trinidad, parts of Southeast Asia, I understand, etc., etc.
yes,
But
yeah.
yes,
So one of the things, firstly, that I think is a major plus for Uber is it came in at a time when there was a lot of concern about security in transporting people from point A to point B, especially for females, because a lot of kidnappings and that kind of stuff.
yes,
And one of the major aspects of Uber is built into its app is inherent security for the rider.
yes,
Being able to not only know who your driver is and about your driver, but to also know the route that your driver is taking and share the route information with someone else. Yeah. And that bodes well for the security of the riders. Yeah. It also holds the drivers accountable and so on, because there is immediate information as to who the driver is, what they did, where they're going, and all that kind of stuff. Now, needless to say, people will pay for that. Okay. So that's one big thing. The second thing is Uber's existence in the market, which is drawing a lot of ire from the regular transport operators, the fact that it's not regulated. So it does not have to conform to certain requirements that the Jatus and those guys have to conform to. So as it relates to regulations or pricing, Uber's pricing mechanism is not subject to regulation. So even though Uber today may be less expensive, Uber's pricing algorithms are based on supply and demand. So right now you'll hear complaints in the United States about the price of Uber because there are fewer drivers and the demand is high. So it's a cost, right? So it's not a given that Uber's pricing is going to be lower all the time. Uber's pricing will fluctuate, and because it's not regulated and it's not subject to the regulatory powers of the transport authority, Uber's prices can fluctuate at will. Now, that's a challenge until they discuss whether or not Uber can be regulated and what aspect of the law is going to regulate Uber. Because what Uber has done is Uber has found a very ingenious way to, they found a loophole in current legislation. Because our current legislation and regulation does not contemplate the business model of something like Uber. And what that is Uber doesn't typically consider itself public transportation in our context. And as such, public transportation laws, as far as they're concerned, don't apply to them, right? So what they've said is, so to kind of put it into some sort of context, if I live in an apartment complex, right, and I take my son to school every day, and there are 10 other families in that complex, and we all decide that, hey, you know what, we're going to carpool. One parent each day will take all the kids to school, all right? We do that on a regular basis. That act is not considered public transportation, even though I'm taking a bunch of kids to school. What I've created is a carpooling club. And that club is not subject to regulation or legislation that exists for transporting a whole bunch of people. And the gray area, I think that what Uber is doing, and it's yet to be tested in court, is that it's playing in between those raindrops. Now, this is what the transport operators, the transport authority, and indeed cabinet are looking to discuss, because the only way that you can look to prevent Uber from working is if they're breaking the law.
Yes.
And the only way to determine that's to test it in court. So I'm waiting for the first legal case against Uber to come up. Yes. Because that is how you're going to determine whether Uber is breaking the law or whether they're functioning within the raindrops or between the raindrops, and what legislation or regulation may either need to be created or adjusted to treat with Uber functioning here. So that's the next thing.
No, this is excellent pointers.
So the next thing that, I mean, I'll tell you what is my biggest concern about Uber, but the other thing that we have to look at is the fact that when you download Uber's app and you start to use it, you're in effect agreeing to a particular contract, their terms and conditions. Now, I don't know if anybody's ever downloaded the Uber app and read those things, but as you become a user of the Uber service, you're bound, and so is the driver. So when the drivers become part of that, you're bound by certain terms and conditions. Some of them have to do with insurance, and who is liable for what, who is responsible for what, who has to pay for what. I mean, one of the most interesting things is if you employ an Uber driver and they take you somewhere, perhaps they're waiting on you, and for whatever reason their car gets towed, you're actually responsible for that. All right, as the person who employed them. So you actually have to pay for their car to be taken out of pound if anything like that, right? So there are a lot of things that we need to be concerned about.
Yes.
But primarily for me, my biggest concern about Uber is the fact that it's going to raise the argument about taxation for big tech. Because what you will find is that even though the drivers are getting 75% of the cost of the service, 25% of that money is leaving Jamaica and it's not being taxed. And that can be a lot of money. That the government, and a lot of revenue that the government is losing. So I think it's gonna, start back that whole conversation about how we tax big tech. So, the Googles for ads and Facebooks and so on, and companies like Uber is gonna look to emerge that argument about how does Uber pay taxes? It's a service used by Jamaicans, but it doesn't pay any taxes here. And money leaves this country when people pay for that service. So what does that now mean for that? So, I mean, those are just a couple of the things that, came across my mind. I mean, it is useful, it is disruptive, it's always a good thing. And don't feel that people who are currently in the taxi service now can't be part of what Uber is offering. In fact, I think that would be a smart move for them to not only work with their own taxi service, but work with Uber as well, because that would boost their funding or their revenue, sorry. And it would, provide, again, a certain layer of safety for people who want to use public transport in that way through the technology that Uber offers.
Boy, Trevor, you have just opened the whole Pandora's box, for want of a better word, a whole Pandora's box, colleagues, about where this is going, because there are a lot of questions that still need to be asked and answered. It means what I have on the deck here, this battle card I have on the deck this evening, is by no means exhaustive. But what Trevor has done for us, our colleagues, he has actually put the conversation into perspective on the second point as to what type of decisions go into determining whether a country adopts the service as discussions between a service provider and the government. You have been saying it. I mean, the cabinet is now hustling to the table to have these conversations, but Uber is already here, and the other services are already here. So I step back. Let me step back a minute, and I'll have to ask our other panelists here who are in the States and Canada, probably to give a little perspective. And probably I'll ask Linkledln and Geoff and Art in that order to tell me a little bit from where they sit, as much as they may know, about how the government would have made a decision to support or not support a mobile ride sharing service in your jurisdiction. You can take it in any order. Linkledln, you're in the valley where the Uber lives, and there are many more ride sharing services like Lyft and others.
Yeah.
Is there a thought behind how the state law, for example, our government determine the adoption of the Uber services and other mobile ride sharing services?
Yeah, so here in California, there was no resistance from the government per se, but one use case I can give you was around healthcare, right? So, as you know, in the US, unlike Canada, in Canada, you get healthcare, pretty much everybody gets it right up front. In the US, you pretty much have to pay for healthcare based on it. You know, most people get it through their employers. And so if you're an Uber driver, who would pay for your healthcare, right? So the state had a problem with that. And in fact, there was a legislation that went to vote, I think it was in November actually, as to whether Uber should hire the drivers as full-time employees so that they can get certain benefits, you know, like unemployment benefits and stuff. And so that was a big discussion here. It wasn't so much about making Uber legitimate, but it's more a question of how you treat the employees. And so the health thing, and I think that legislation failed, thankfully, because that would have caused Uber to probably close business or something, you know, because it would have cost them a lot more money to have to pay benefits to employees and stuff like that. So, so that's some of the discussion that's going on. Some of the discussion going on is how do you ensure that those workers are protected, right? Whether they're getting health insurance, unemployment, those kind of things, right? I think that's probably some of the discussion happening here. I think in Canada, maybe it's different because maybe the taxi associations may have different, you know, bearings in terms of whether you allow a competitor to come in and disrupt you, that kind of thing. So
So just to get it clear, you're saying in the valley, the Uber does not pay for the health care of the workers. They manage
contractors. They're contractors, so they don't pay for anything.
Yeah, they don't pay for anything. You have to take care of it based on your earning. Okay.
Yes, it's up to you totally. So if you go to a hospital, you get care, and the government is saying, "Hey, who's going to pay for this care?" You know?
Oh, thanks for that clarification. So Geoff, let me pass that directly to Geoff then, who's in Ottawa. Is this what is happening in Canada as well? What is the whole issue relating to like government and the adoption of Uber and other type of ride sharing services? How do they go about making the decisions here?
So they enter. So they entered the market much the same as they are in Jamaica, coming in and essentially skirting around the existing laws and forcing a legal conversation. You know, if they were to come and ask for permission, they would never get it. Right? There's too many vested interests. They come in and they force the legal issue, and they did the same thing in Canada and in the different jurisdictions. And so their legal department is immense. And so what they ended up happening, at least I know in the local context here in Ottawa, is essentially the jurisdictions were all left to come up with different rules to deal with the fact that they do treat their employees, or sorry, their drivers as independent contractors. And so what they were able to do is, for example, impose certain restrictions in terms of the safety that's required for vehicles that are being run under their program, right? So in a crazy twist of fate, I actually tried to sign up to be an Uber driver at one point. So actually, because you hear the story, right? Hey, the kids are off at soccer practice. I'll go and drive for an hour and make some money on the side, you know, while they're doing their thing. It actually turns out that what the government ended up doing was putting in a bunch of restrictions. And so what they would require is, you know, you needed to have criminal background check, which makes sense. You needed to have a special safety done, Uber type safety or Lyft type safety that you need to do on your vehicle, in addition to whatever safety is required for your licensing. You had to have, and the big one is, because they're independent contractors, they have to collect taxes and file taxes as a business. And so you're actually you have to register as an individual for the equivalent of GCT so that you can charge your riders GCT, because you're not working for Uber, you are an independent contractor. And so there's a whole other business that they run that allows people to essentially file all their compliance paperwork so that they are in compliance as an independent business, because they don't ever want it to be assume that they're an employee that's entitled to benefits. And so what has ended up happening is someone like myself who's not going to go and do all that work, essentially that sort of, hey, let's just casually drive on the side, really that disappeared. And what you see is the people that were formerly driving taxis are now driving Uber. And so it really just shifted and took out the existing infrastructure of taxi companies and just intermediated it so that the same people are driving for less money, more risk, and are worse off. And most of them are complaining that they no longer make the same money because they were unionized previously, right? So it has really, it's shed a lot of the protections and income for the drivers and has not really allowed the casual driver to join up. So most of the benefits that you hear about aren't really, once the government gets involved and starts putting in some restrictions, and we can only expect them to do that, especially in the tourism sector, right? So you're going to have people, staying at villas or resorts and calling up their Uber from their phone. And, that whole ecosystem of how those drivers are certified, who gets paid what, is all going to be disrupted in a way that I think that is going to be, far, far greater than any of the disruption we're going to see sort of in the Kingston or the urban markets. It's really what I think they see as the gold mine is disrupting the tourism sector and that whole establishment.
No, this is interesting. I tell you, this is Caribbean Technology Thought Leadership Sunday evening at 4:30. This is like a book in itself. We're actually writing this evening because there are so many different perspectives to this conversation on Uber's entry into the market, the mobile ride sharing market here in Jamaica. But Art, I would like you to weigh in from where you sit between New York and other states. What is the take on this from where you sit?
Well, if you've ever visited New York City, which I know, Sean, you have a number of times you've visited me here, you'll see that there's a yellow vehicle, yellow cab, everywhere, right? And
I avoid them like the plague.
But exactly, and those medallions are like ridiculously expensive, right? We're talking hundreds of thousands of US dollars. And I just wanted to go back just to say that everything Linkledln said is happening nationwide, right? So it's not restricted to California or any one state. And Uber has an immense amount of standards and rules and protocols and policies for safety and CSAT scores, customer satisfaction scores. And they have somewhat of a revolving door, by the way. Drivers get weeded out and they don't play around with that, right? But I wanted to say that the impact was well beyond the ride share, because it's not the ride share that's really the big impact. It's the Uber concept, right? And so what one thing I saw in New York City is the yellow cabs cleaned up right away. They made noise and they yelled, they carried on for a while. And then they realized, you know what, let's compete. So right away, they cleaned up the vehicles. They started using electric vehicles, and they even created their own app. So at least you could just use the app, see where the nearest yellow cab is, and book it the same way you could do for Uber. In addition, a whole bunch of existing taxi services basically Uberized, that word again, Sean, their service. And so now what you have is this healthy sort of basket of mobile driven transport services. But I can tell you just factually that beyond that, I'm in discussions with Uber right now for my jewelry business, because I want to deliver 2-hour delivery service when Trevor gets on and buys a new diamond from me for his wife's for the anniversary, to have it delivered in 2 hours, right? And I can't wait for FedEx and I can't wait for UPS, right? So Uber is basically saying, well, hey, guess what? Why don't you connect your website into the Uber infrastructure, and we'll just have an Uber driver, pick up your package. Package could be human or diamond. And so that's really where this is going to go. It's well beyond the sharing a ride and taxi service. It's a bigger logistics impact that we're going to see. And I think that's where folks need to be putting all the attention, and laws need to be put in place, because it's going to be a logistics disruption.
Hey, just to piggyback on that, Fide, something we need to also remember is that Uber is not just about transporting people, but you have things like Uber Eats,
yes,
which will play into the the food delivery space down here, which is growing rapidly right about now, given
COVID,
curfews associated with COVID and so on. So that's another layer of competition that Uber brings that has nothing to do with public transportation, right? So it's another thing to consider, because from a logistics standpoint, absolutely, Uber has, and its model facilitates a whole host of opportunities and possibilities.
All right, so this is Caribbean Technology Thought Leadership, where we discuss the most riveting points relating to issues of the day on technology. And listen, this has been an interesting Sunday afternoon here, June 27th. Uberization and its disruption to the Jamaican and Caribbean landscape relating to where this is going. Now, I noticed, Mr. Clacken, you are here. Thank you for joining, and I didn't take note of that. Thank you for joining the call this afternoon. You want to weigh in on this?
Yes, I just want to share a quick experience I had.
Yes.
When I was in Trinidad a few years ago, I was searching for a location because I get lost easily, and I brought up Google Maps, and Uber was on it, right? So I was able to book Uber directly from Google Maps. But no, I recognize that Uber and Google kind of broke up for some reason, and I'm not sure why. Maybe Linkledln can probably shed some light on that. But it kind of had me concerned. Why would it seems like a perfect match? Why would Google drop the opportunity? Is it because they invested in Lyft or something? That's one thing. But just to piggyback on what I think Trevor
Forrest, yes.
Was saying earlier, right? So apart from Uber Eats, I'm pretty sure I heard something about Uber having driverless cars soon, or the probably that's in the works. And I wonder if that is their model. If they bring that globally, would that have a negative effect on the taxi industry, even in Jamaica? Those two thoughts I wanted to share. If Linkledln could probably weigh in on why Google dropped Uber, if you know, that would help a lot as well for me. Thanks.
What was the question? Give me the question again.
I think you said in Trinidad, the experience was in Trinidad, you said, O'Neill.
Yes.
Google parted ways with Uber. Well, I don't know if Linkledln knows the answer to that.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure I know the answer, to be honest. What I do know, though, is that obviously every cloud startup, they start out using cloud services from AWS or Google for some reason, and then they decide to build their own data center. So I know Uber is actually building their own infrastructure and stuff, and they're probably building their own mapping app. So maybe that's part of the reason why there's some friction there. But I'm not sure exactly what happened in Trinidad.
So okay. So thank you for that, Linkledln. And your second question, O'Neill, was
about driverless cars.
That is coming to Jamaica. I think that's a whole culture by itself. I don't think that is even properly in America, but it could get there. I suppose it could get there.
That would affect.
That would require infrastructure that isn't widely deployed yet.
Yes,
yeah,
that's not.
It's going to take a while. Yeah, because Google has invested quite a bit in driverless cars, actually. And obviously, Google don't make cars. And what they do,
Yes.
I think they're partnered with Ford and some of the other manufacturers to service that technology. But it's going to take a while. I've actually driven a Tesla, which was, has a driverless capability. And it's pretty accurate. It's pretty good. You don't want to overuse it, but I think it will take a while for that to mature, where a taxi is totally autonomous, right? So I think that's probably 3 to 5 years out at this point.
So, all right. So in the context of this conversation, and I say Sheldon Paul, my immediate past president of the JCS on the call. Welcome and good afternoon to you, Sheldon. You know, my second question seems completely thrown out, because if Uber did not require any permission per se to come to Jamaica to start a business, and I have a lot of questions about that, because does Uber have an office in Jamaica then to hire people, based on all of what you guys have been saying since evening? And how you give a man a contract then in Jamaica to be working and driving Uber, seeing that Uber is already here a week and people already know what to do. Seemingly they know to work. So somebody can explain that to me quickly. Yes, Miss Watson, Mrs. Watson.
Yeah, I had the same thought. And I mean, the same little video the young lady did. She asked the driver, how did he sign up? Was very instructive. He said from the time they said they were coming, he signed up. But he didn't hear anything from them. So he didn't bother with it. And then when he heard they got here, he said it took him 15 minutes. 15 minutes to get hooked up to the system. Ostensibly, this is not a ride-sharing company. This is a tech company. This is an app.
Yes,
I've been looking for a location with my traditional mind. There is none, apparently.
There's none. Okay.
So it's they don't even have a physical presence here. I've been looking for who owns this franchise. Can't get information. The most I've been able to garner is that Guardian Insurance has something to do with the company.
Yes.
I don't.
We need to do some investigation on that. Yes, we have to do some investigation.
For the driver and this passenger, I don't know if it is for the I don't know. We're just assuming things here at this point, because as I said, it's not formed yet. We, like the government, are trying and figure out how they are going to be able to exploit this service for the country's benefit and to protect the citizens at the same time. In the meantime, I can get an Uber.
In the meantime, but it shows out my second question, because the Uberization is even displacing the questions, because when I think the question apply, I don't have an answer really from anyone unless somebody could say. But the fact of the matter, that Trevor said it earlier, they don't need a permission per se, because there could be a carpooling club for all you all ask. So there's no legislation to deal with that. So I will defer on that question for now, recognizing that they can come and they can offer services. And it's not like they're bringing in cars into Jamaica. It's really a collaboration of rides locally. So
they don't even own a log tool anywhere.
They don't own anything. So it's like the Airbnb of transportation, if I can call it that, right? The Airbnb.
So yes. Sean.
Yes.
Yeah, Sean, again, remember something I alluded to earlier. What we are seeing is the fact that the technology that is being provided here, either outstrips or outpaces the legislation that exists. So what Uber is providing is not contemplated. You know, its business model is not contemplated by the legislation. So you see a couple of things happening. Those who are constrained by regulations and legislation in the transport sector do not know how to treat with this. And their automatic response is negative and resistance. But from the legislative standpoint, government and so on, government has a duty to, it's a very delicate balancing act, to protect its citizens, but it has a duty to also ensure that there is economic activity, that businesses can come here and thrive and do business and all of that wonderful stuff. And they must do so in an acceptable and legal way. And like I said, what has happened, and you don't need permission to come here to do that. Google never asked permission to come here to provide any of the services that we use. So Google didn't ask permission to provide us with Google Maps. We never ask permission from the government to do that, but we use it. A lot of the things that Facebook does, they ain't ask the government permission to do it, but we use it. All right. And this is why I'm saying it's going to open up a whole new set of questions about how governments interact with technology companies, especially those who do not have or need to set up shop in Jamaica. Uber doesn't need to set up shop in Jamaica, right? So it's gonna open up a new set of questions, because we're talking about business models that are not contemplated by traditional law.
Yes, yes.
Right?
Right.
So that's how we have to start looking at. That's how government is now having to contend with this stuff, because how did you ensure that you balance, the opportunities that people participating in what Uber brings, which is revenue generation? Because remember, people who are Uber drivers themselves, depending on how the laws are handled or changed or whatever, could themselves be required to pay tax. So you might have a whole bunch of people who are now in the system, having to pay tax because they have to register as an independent, perhaps sole proprietor business, right? That's revenue for government, right? So they have to balance all of these things. So it's a very complex balancing act. But those are some of the things that we kind of really have to consider when we're looking at this sort of stuff, because the technology is outpacing the laws.
Yes, that's the bottom line. That's the bottom line. I really appreciate that input, Trevor, because the context of the questions here have to now shift. So, all right. So I thank you for that input, and I'm going to open back the floor up to and I think I see Larkland's up or whatever though. Larkland, you wanted to interject on that point that Trevor was making? Yes.
Bring in 2 quick points here. How do they collect payments in Jamaica, and how do they pay the drivers? Do they have some kind of local incorporation, even though they're an online company?
That's what I'm saying.
Have some legal entity in Jamaica that collect money and pay the drivers, that kind of thing?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. Anybody knows on this call?
Yes, from the same little video. I tell you that little video is very instructive.
Go ahead, Mrs. Watson. Go ahead.
Her MasterCard could have been used. She could opt to pay in cash. So apparently the banks have already aligned themselves. And their payment platforms have been aligned, and she said she had used it overseas. So actually Uber had retained her overseas information.
Credentials, yes.
Brings up something with Data Protection Act and all these things. I mean, they're coming into your space. Jamaicans are well traveled. So if you're in Jamaica, you jump on the Uber app. If you had a credit card in London, it might come up.
Yeah. And the other point I wanted to make too is about the tourism in general. So if I'm a tourist coming from the US, most of your tourists now, because of COVID, are coming from the US. They're used to using Uber. When they come to Jamaica, having Uber available is a big plus as well.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So definitely.
Bear in mind, Uber and Uber type service is not the first service of that nature in Jamaica, because on the North Coast, Ray Lee's Arrive platform is very similar to Uber, and that's been working down there for quite a while. A lot of people don't know about it because it's not in Kingston and St. Andrew area, which is primarily where Uber is working now. So again, the Uber-like services in Jamaica, it's not the first time. There have also been other offerings. Get There. About 2 others that I'm familiar with have also been in operation as well. So it's what you're seeing with Uber. It's not the first time Jamaica has had that kind of service being offered here. I think it's the way in which, and of course the popularity of Uber, but the way in which Uber and of course its size has come into the market, that it is just really, causing a lot of angst for some and questions and concerns for others.
Okay, so all right, so because my previous question was mute and you guys have done a good job answering best relating to the country's adoption through government and otherwise, it throws that out completely. What Joy said, however, based on Larkland's point earlier, with respect of, I'm going to say, let us say it was a new Uber driver, Joy, and you have to, or you're a new customer, you'd have to go and register with like a JMB or NCB or Scotia, the card to now recognize it with an Uber service. I'm just wondering, seeing that we are now in Jamaica and the reality is that the service is in Jamaica, if the local banks would then also have to be supporting new customers locally in this regard. So it would mean the banks are already on board. I take that point. The banks would have to already be on board because it's done internationally. So I think that's a mute point. New or existing customers, it's a mute point. The service is already offered. Okay, so this is clear. So it leads to another point then, another question here, which Trevor seemingly started to answer. But I'd like to get a viewpoint from everyone on this call in a sense then. What has been the success of these mobile ride-sharing services from what you see globally and here in the Caribbean? I didn't know what Trevor just said a while ago. I didn't know that we had more mobile ride-sharing services in Jamaica. I'm a student all over again. It's Uber alone I'm paying attention to as the mobile ride-sharing, but evidently there seems to be others. So can I get a perspective from you guys and starting with probably a local observation of this and going back to like Geoff and Art and Larkland as to these mobile ride sharing services. We have this in the Caribbean. This is going on a while, so we're just hearing about it in this big way. What has been the experience with them? Why are they not trying? What is the issue there? Why we're not hearing much about them? Let me ask about the Caribbean experience first, and who knows about those.
Well, whilst lecturing at UA in Trinidad, I mean,
yes,
staying, most of us when we go into lecture, we stay at in Port of Spain, right?
Yes.
At the Marriott, and Uber is the preferred transport. We message and they'll come and they're there in a minute and they're on campus, and then you Uber again and they bring you back. And so while they were there, I found it was convenient. The quality of the vehicles, the cleanliness of the vehicles, there was a certain standard that you would expect. And it's the same thing that I saw in New York, except in New York we had a number of other competitors just popped up because all the taxi companies just basically rented the same platform or platforms like the Uber platform and offered the same service. And what you find is every millennial, I can speak for my two, so I have two of them, they probably have never taken a yellow cab. And they're New York City kids. They're always on an Uber thing. So extremely successful in every definition of that. It has been my experience globally.
And even in Trinidad, although Trinidad is now, I understand Trinidad has ceased the service.
Yeah, as a customer, I was extremely satisfied. It was very predictable, and I was never late for any lectures because that's why I went with them. I just didn't want to take a chance with a guy driving a Maxi not showing up.
Excellent point. So, all right, in this order, I see Sheldon's hand is up and Larkland. Can I take the views in that order? Welcome, Sheldon.
There's a afternoon, colleagues. Just a question. Do you know why Uber is no longer in Trinidad? Anybody? Before I make my comments.
Some of the rumors I heard had, and again, I preface by saying rumors, right? Yes. Was that there was a pushback from the local operators and the power that they have. And then there were threats because the Uber drivers are easily identified, right? Obviously they've got that sticker. And so you found that there was then suddenly a reduction in available drivers. And so the wait time started to increase, and that's the rumor I heard, and then they pulled out. Don't know how true that is though, but
okay, that's interesting. I think we should know what happened there.
Yeah.
But in certain countries or cities or even in states, I mean, it's not that Uber is very, what do you call it, friendly to government. So even in terms of taxes and all of that, I'm not sure if Uber itself in earning money would have be paying the government taxes. I find that I've seen already where in Jamaica, the fares that they want to charge, it seems very attractive. But the reality is I've seen like, Twitter posts where what they advertise and what the taxis or the Uber driver actually charges is actually different. I find that, there are some things about Uber, and it's just in terms of what is out there right now that they tend to take advantage of the drivers. And I know within the yellow taxi services all over America, what they were doing, they paid a lot of money to government to license the cars on the road.
Yeah, the medallion.
And Uber got around that, right? And I think it's a similar thing here. So the taxi companies here and the taxi drivers, they do pay for the licensing. Now, I think where the Jamaican public is concerned is that while they're paying a lot of money to the Jamaican government for the service, is that the government has, it's my opinion, but I know a lot of people share the same thing. They have not done a good job in protecting the public with the taxes they have been collecting from these taxi men. So here now Uber has found a way, and I know they have the best lawyers in the world who can look at our laws, like what Trevor was saying, and find I wouldn't even call them loopholes, because as Trevor was saying, is they're not just ready for a platform economy. So they find a way. I think they said that is a rental service that you're paying for, right? But for me, where I'm very disappointed, because there are a lot of Uber type applications that are here, and some of them are actually they are operating. I mean, when I was a part of ENDS, and one of the things that we thought in where ENDS would actually have to go, because using traditional service for food delivery in Jamaica, it costs anywhere from $500 to $700 to deliver your food, and that's not convenient. I mean, if you're thinking about on the lockdown, you want to buy a hamburger or even a patty and cocoa bread, and on top of it, you're paying a $500 delivery fee. That doesn't make any sense. So we were saying it could have some kind of a Uberization or the Uber Eats, where it could come down to $200 or $300. That would be much more attractive. But I was hoping that the entrepreneurs in Jamaica and the business people in Jamaica would look at these opportunities so that it would actually take advantage of them, because there are people out there who can build the technology. So why not have the business people come and create the applications then that could have the equivalent of a Uber Eats, or the government to recognize that we need to, if we're going to collect money for taxi services, then let's offer something that is safe and secure. A similar thing with an Uber, where there's a rating of drivers. You can see the type of vehicle that's coming for you. You can track the person, things like that to keep you safe. So I'm actually disappointed in Jamaica, because in the day, Uber as a foreign company is here to make money, and therefore it's going to be foreign exchange leaving the country at some point in time. For us as Jamaicans, just taking service from point A to B in Jamaica. So that's something, I mean, I do want to open competition in Jamaica, yes, but I'm just wondering and really kind of disappointed our own Jamaicans as to why something like that we couldn't come together and offer our own people.
Sheldon, I totally feel the point, because about 4 years ago, I got into discussions with one of the taxi services and explained to them how they could do it. showed them the platform, and they chose not to because they didn't want to pay the annual subscription fee to be on the platform. If you go look at jugnoo.com, they can have your taxi service Uberized in 3 days. So technology is a commodity, as I've always said. So the question still comes back to, what is it that's stopping the entrepreneurs? I wouldn't say entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs would have picked it up, right? But the leaders and owners of these services, what is preventing them then from seeing this? Well, you know what? Machiavelli said it. Because of man's incredulity, he's unwilling to accept change until he's experienced it. Now that they're experiencing it, Sheldon, you watch.
We don't have to watch. We'll wait, because the motivation is here now, like a big pitchfork behind them to move and take it. Otherwise, you're going to go out of business.
3 days, any taxi service in Jamaica can be offering the same service if they want to.
Give them a week and let's see who first goes there, because somebody with any amount of futuristic thinking and strategic thinking will start to court one of these services in less than a week flat. You may not be.
Well, I can tell you it doesn't need to be a week. So I'm aware of, no, I'm serious. I'm aware of the fact that one of the major taxi service providers in the corporate area,
yes,
is in fact encouraging their drivers to become part of the Uber platform.
What?
Right? Yeah,
What?
yeah. But that makes sense, right? Because
Yes.
a lot of these drivers, some of them are sitting and waiting for a call when in fact they could be servicing, you know, the demand for Uber customers.
Yes.
Now, the thing about it is, and like I say, when I hear people like Edgerton Newman, you know, raising one big hullabaloo about, oh, we will not tolerate things like Uber, I'm like, well, that's the kind of thinking we're dealing with. Because if you had sense, you would kind of figure out either how to have your own or how to leverage what Uber brings to the table,
right,
and change whatever legislations or regulations you need to ensure that Jamaica gets the maximum out of that. So, you know, the fact is, for years you've been functioning this way and not doing it. Now competition comes and your response is, we're not going to tolerate it. Well, what's your option? What's your solution? What's your new offering going to be? So in much the same way that, you know, Fidi was saying, look, when the taxi operators in the US came under pressure, they made adjustments, right? Similarly, you're going to see taxi operators, you know, in lieu of whatever, you know, transport authority and government says, you know, either say, well, I'm going to give this thing a try and see how it works, or, you know, you're going to start to see their business drop off and they start to complain. And at that point in time, you know, you're going to hear the calls for government to intervene. And, you know, government will have to, again, like I said before, it's a delicate balancing act, but has to determine what's best for the economy at large, not just the taxi operators, but the consumer that is going to use these things. You know, like I said initially, and Sheldon reiterated it, my concern about services like Uber is the fact that the 25% they take off the top of the cost does not stay in Jamaica and is not subject to tax. And that's a significant revenue loss to the Jamaican economy. And we need, and it's going to raise the discussion about how governments, not only in Jamaica, but all over the place, treat with tech companies that are able to provide services in this way without paying taxes in the countries that they provide these services, because again, legislation does not contemplate these kinds of business models. Netflix does not pay tax in Jamaica.
That's true.
But them get my money all the time.
I know Cheryl and I had that conversation some time ago. So this is a very riveting conversation, and thanks so much for that input, Trevor. I know I see Geoff's hand up. I know Larkland's hand was up, but look like he put it back down, and I see Ket Joy's hand up. I want to recognize all three in weighing in, and others who are also on the call. You know, we're kind of free flowing, because I realize some of the questions are completely disrupted by the fact that Uber's physical presence is not here to account for the questions, the answer to some of the questions. So we're a bit more free flowing. So I saw Geoff's hand up. I recall Larkland, and I'm seeing Ket Joy's hand up. Can I take it in that order, Jeff?
Yes, I think one of the sad things about this, and acknowledging that there are already some local technology providers who have put together some technology around this, is the fact that ultimately Uber has access to a degree of capital that is simply not accessible to most of the other technology startups locally, right? So the technology is not unique, but I mean, Uber lost an incredible amount of money getting established in the marketplace. You know, they subsidize the rates, and so some of the rate numbers we see now are people say, hey, I can do it for $300 or $200. Wow, this is great. Or I get a bonus every time I take a ride. I get a bonus ride, you know, 500 off my next ride, sort of thing, because they can drop that kind of capital. I mean, they wrote off $1 billion US in their autonomous vehicle. They got out of the autonomous vehicle business. They were trying to get their self-driving cars, and they got out of it after investing over $1 billion US. So that's the kind of capital at play, and I just think it's probably a warning to all of the startups that are in Jamaica right now, domestically produced technology startups who don't have the capital to compete, that, you know, these companies can come in and rule all over them. And much to Trevor's point, then you're essentially watching, you know, dollars flow out to foreign firms, whereas there was already technology available locally from entrepreneurs locally, just not enough capital to compete with a company the size of Uber.
This is Caribbean Technology Thought Leadership on a Sunday afternoon. Leave your comments at the end of the podcast post for me as we compile and respond to them weekly. This is definitely a conversation that is mind-boggling. Before I allow, and Larkland, you had your hand up as well. I know you put it back down and kept Joy. So the answer to the question earlier about the success and failure of the ride sharing, what this has morphed into is the fact that the mobile ride sharing services were already here a long time ago. They did not build traction. Uberization was presented to many of them, but the success of those models have not yet materialized until Uber itself comes to the space. That's an interpretation I could have on the success and failure of the mobile ride sharing services here in Jamaica, with the exception of the US, where I know you have like Lyft and Uber being, you know, competitors, if I can say they are. The argument seems still wide open. But I leave it at that. That's a part of my interpretation as the facilitator for what I'm gleaning as some, or discerning as some of the responses so far on the success and factors for this mobile ride sharing. I put it back in the queue though, that Ket Joy, your hand is up, and Larkland, I don't know if you're still here, but I recognize you both in that fashion. Larkland looked like he stepped out a bit.
I'm here, man. I'm here.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, let's Ket Joy go first, and I'll go after.
Sure.
Yeah, what I'm noticing with Uber and most of these big tech companies is that they are doing, and these are the big tech companies that have money to throw, like that $1 billion. It didn't work and the billion is lost, and they press on. They are entering emerging markets. They're in the Caribbean, they're in Malaysia. I remember when Uber went to India.
Yes.
Now, I don't know if it is succeeding in India. If anybody knows, please tell me. But they have a very culturally driven transportation system in India. And I didn't think it was going to succeed because everything is wrapped up and tied up with how they do, how they navigate their lived experience over there. So an Uber or an Uber Eats working in India, I thought the culture was going to destroy that business strategy.
And
Because
Mrs. Watson, we must remember that Uber came around from about 2009. This
Oh,
company
nine.
came, yes, it came into
these
existence.
two guys who sold up 2 other startups they had, took all of that money and put it into Uber, and it came out of an idea because they left somewhere one night and couldn't get a ride home. And so why can't we get a ride from our phone? And the rest is history. But they had the capital to throw behind that idea. But it's not that we don't have a thriving transportation business. We are not short of taxis, robot taxis, legal taxis, any kind of taxi, bus system. I don't even know if you remember what JUTC used to look like not even 20 years ago. We no longer have that history. So our space really and truly is not lacking. Uber is not filling a void here, but it is selling you an idea.
Yes. Yes.
And they took the loss leading strategy, which will work initially. My take on it, as a student of culture and society, my take on it is that they are going to thrive in this dry phase, and then it's gonna peter out like everything else, so we get used to it. And it would be left up to Uber to stay or to go, because I don't believe they could unseat the existing transportation system. I would give our transportation system a C. I don't know if you guys overseas remember what it was like trying to get a bus in the 90s. It's a good C+ now, up to a B. So
yes.
Not filling any void here, but you know how we like new things.
Yes,
and we have the Uber app on our phones from our last trip to London and Canada and the USA. So we like the idea of it. But the minute that loss leading strategy comes up to market, because first you have to catch the people and then you tick that price up. The minute it balances out, we're back to the regular on-time calling.
But Keth Joy, I think I hear your point, but I think that's why I've been sort of suggesting it's not a discussion about Uber, right? It's a discussion around what I'm calling mobile logistics services, right?
Yes.
And in parentheses, logistics is people, packages, and anything stuff. As the e-commerce trends grow in Jamaica, which they are,
yes,
right?
Yes.
You know, folks like Sheldon and Trevor and a lot of other people who are in startup Jamaica can talk to you about what's going on there. People are going to want to have faster ways of getting the stuff they order delivered to them.
Yes.
Same concept, right? So it's not that Uber is going to pack up and leave. They might very well leave. The need is still there. The expectation is still there. And that's why I'm saying all these taxi services need to go and start offering these kinds of mobile logistics services, because it's beyond moving people. It's delivering food, like Trevor said. But it's also delivering organs for transplants. We can go on with it, right?
Yes.
And in my case, it's the diamond that you just bought is having your diamond delivered to you in 2 hours. It's a service discussion that we really should be having. Uber is one instantiation of it. When they're gone, the need is still there.
Still there.
Who's going to do it? And it's not a technology issue anymore. I just want to close off on this. It's not even one of these things where, you know, tech companies overseas are capitalized. Look, this is a platform as a service. It's a commodity. For 5,000 US a year, your taxi company can be doing all of what Uber is doing if you really want to. That's literally where we are.
That's right.
So you're saying this is one iteration of their business model.
That's right. That's what he's saying. One iteration. There are so many others.
The thing about it is, this is a small country. It's not getting any bigger, and you can reach anywhere in under 2 hours. If you drive like me, but you can reach anywhere under 2 hours end to end, St. Thomas to the Grill. So the whole idea of getting it faster, cheaper, quicker is subjective to me. because at present, these things can be fulfilled by us. Smarter, quicker, more accessible on Uber's platform or any Uber type platform. And I still hold that the minute, as Trevor said, and somebody else said, the minute our local tech people realize that this is an era they can exploit and they make an alliance with corporate Jamaica, we will get ahead of the trend. This is a small country. If it were larger, a larger space, I could see room for both things happening here.
All right.
But and they're gonna best us right now, but we'll catch up.
I take that point, Joy, and Art, I understand definitely what you're saying. Definitely take that point. I think Linkledln wanted to weigh in on this conversation quickly. Yes.
I can just add a few points. I suppose the one technique they teach here in the Valley is a thing called blitzscaling. And blitzscaling, yeah. So it's kind of playing to the loss leading. You can use loss leading is the older way of saying it. But the way Uber work or a lot of these tech companies work is when they discover a market, they deploy a lot of capital on it to control the market. So we're here talking about Uber. We're not talking about some other local app that probably can do similar things.
Yes.
Uber build a brand, they build a brand and they build the logistics around it. And I think that's what local companies need to start to look at, how to, be smarter at marketing and how to, recruit drivers, all of that kind of stuff, right? You have the app, you can get the app on Fiverr right now for $1,000, literally. You can get the app for $1,000. So it's not the app itself. You don't need developers to do it. You just need good marketing and, good logistics to get it off the ground,
So in essence, then what you're saying, Linkledln, and you're playing to the answers to the questions of the success of the mobile ride sharing and even the adoption, is that once you have an Uberized type model, and I think Art is saying the same thing, you don't have to be Uber to accept Uber. What you're really doing, you are actually looking at a service flow, a process flow, and then even ends that Sheldon was talking about could be Uberized. The local startup companies could be Uberized. So therefore, Uber still wins because the mindset would have changed in the local transportation, on-time taxi, all these other taxi services, right, would literally Uberize their business model to now say, okay, they can provide this service. So we wouldn't be going back to the same. That's what I'm gleaning, Joy, from listening to Art and to Linkledln and others here, that it's regardless of whether or not the country is small or large, it's the way in which we do business and in which we operate. And it's the same thing I'm getting from Trevor as well. So it actually answers two questions there somewhat clearer to me. And the only thing that stands in the way is people's willingness or unwillingness to adopt based on the environment. But people will change with time. So this is a riveting conversation, and I really like where this is going. I see 3 hands up, and I want to recognize the views here. So Sheldon's hand is back up. Joy, your hand was up before. Garrett's hand is up. So I think Sheldon and Garrett in that order, if I may.
Yeah, I wanted to win because I just say it's not about the app, but the business model.
Yes.
And the Jamaican consumers, why they were like a rush to it. Because let me tell you some of the experiences that we have. Uber has a special now for the frontline workers. And I remember the frontline workers, and to this day, they said that they feel shunned by the taximen because the taximen they're putting themselves at risk in taking them to work.
Yes.
So Uber comes along and have a special for them, and therefore a lot of them are now talking to Uber. Another thing is, somebody mentioned for a driver to get on the platform and up and running, it took like 15 minutes.
Yes.
I'm sure a regular taxi service to get the license and everything is weeks. Now, I'm aware of this now. Some people who tell me from time to time, they have experienced it. Between 4 and 5 o'clock, it's hard to get a taxi in Jamaica. There are certain times where isn't capacity, and you call on time, and they will tell you that there's no taxi available, or your wait time is an hour and a half, and all of that. Because imagine with peak time, there's a lot of traffic on the road. So even within just Kingston alone, you might not be going very far, but with bumper to bumper traffic, right? There are certain times where you actually need more drivers. Now, I mean, when the economy opens up back and there's events, keeping and all of that, usually in the night, 2 a.m., 3 a.m. in the morning, you're leaving an event. It's difficult to get a taxi, right? So there's a void that I'm sure Uber has studied that they know is in Jamaica. I give another thing. Whenever foreigners come to Jamaica, let's say when they feel very uncomfortable taking local taxi, they hear it is unsafe. There's enough negative news when they go on the search taking taxi in Jamaica that it comes back saying that, boy, to be careful, right? So a lot of people, foreigners, when they come, they trust the Uber brand because they don't know on time. They don't know on time is screening their people and all of that. So the business model itself is where Uber is probably seeing that there isn't anybody who's taking advantage of a need in Jamaica. All of these tourists coming in and don't know what is the best way. I mean, fine if they go to the hotel connoisseur and I said directly, yes, you can take Peter. Peter is safe. But the hotel will tell you the same thing. No, just don't go out there and just go take any taxi like that, right? So I think the app itself is one thing, but Uber in terms of service and need. When I saw that they came and they said I have a special thing for frontline workers, I said, these people are doing their research.
That is right? What I was about to say, Sheldon. You're right. Yes.
I'd like to see our own business people, the venture capitalists, the technology industry, come together and up the service. I see in this where I do agree from where we're coming from. We're probably at a C in terms of taxi service, but we really need to be at an A at this point in time.
Well, I'm going to make a special call, Sheldon, that the Go SME team probably should have a little forum around this Uber as a national consort to understand the principle of what is happening here and how it affects them, because it's clear to me that it's not a visible hand. It's like how COVID moving around is not visible. Uber is not visible, it's not somebody, is technology just transcending into a space and they have the capital to do it and more people are moving into that collaboration. So I think there needs to be a consort around this in terms of the mindset and out of this call today, that is one request I'm putting on the table. But I'll defer to the next request. But very good point there, Sheldon. It is in fact true what you have said. Garrett, the floor is yours. If Sheldon is finished, that is. The floor is yours. If Sheldon is finished.
Yeah, man, I'm finished.
Yes, Garrett, you can go ahead.
Well, Prof, you stole my thunder. So
no, take it again. Take it over. Yes.
So our reaction to Uber being here is what determines what will we make of it, what will happen to the economy, and it really now depends on the business leaders, the heads of these transportation organizations, how much they are willing to invest in their marketing and their process review and process engineering, and how much they're willing to put into the embracing of the technology that Uber uses to be successful. Because right now, throwing up your hands in the air and running to the government for protection is not
going to happen.
Right, it's not
in a pandemic to at that. We're in the middle of a pandemic. Yes,
exactly. You may throw up your hands and run to the government now, and the government changes in 6 months and you're back to square one or -1. So, they need to determine, are we going to embrace the technology? I mean, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Somebody is showing us the way. Yes. There is nothing that prevents us from adopting this method.
Yes.
Right? Let's adopt it, tweak it to suit our particular environment, leverage it and make the most of it. If they choose not to, then we know where that is gonna go.
Yes, excellent point you made there. Excellent point you made there. I realize that Kate Joy and Sheldon's hand is up, so I want to recognize you again in that order. But listen, I want to keep this going around, so I haven't heard from Dr. Campbell and a few others in a little bit, so I'm throwing it back out there. So, but I recognizing the input of the conversation, so I defer to Sheldon, Kate Joy, and Trevor in that order, please.
Okay. Sheldon, you put
No, I took down my hand. Sorry.
okay. I'm just here
My hand.
to stir the pot a little bit. And I just realized that there's a new ride sharing company coming soon to Jamaica.
What are you saying to me?
And it's called TechWe. And you must sign up now. It's launching soon in Jamaica, and it will be up doing rides in Montego Bay and Negril.
I think they're all in Jamaica and they're deciding to do what Trevor just said. They're
deciding to pivot. This one is actually headquartered in Clearwater, Florida, but it named Montego Bay Negril, that side of the country. And let me tell you something, gentlemen and lady. There is no new idea under the sun. Yes. We can agree on that. So there is it's futile to fight against the moving change that is happening. This is the fourth revolution, the tech revolution. Yes. And it's no longer business as usual. If we did not have this pandemic, these things would have happened anyway. It's because of the pandemic. It has sped up what is happening to us now, ends and all of these things coming. And we're not going back to business as usual when the pandemic ends. And this is a much faster, more fluid way of doing business. So we should not resist. It's a beautiful thing. Yes, and yes. The government catch up with how it's going to modify its legislation and widen their tax net. That's their government. That's what they're supposed to do. Right. And these disruptors will continue to enter our space virtually and cream it off until you come correct and find out how it is you're going to exploit these businesses.
Interesting point.
So well said, well said.
And don't resist.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Thank you very much on that, Kate Joy. So a lot of food for thought here on Caribbean Technology Thought Leadership on a Sunday. You know, we have a very esteemed panel looking at Uberization of the local transportation sector. It is more than Uber coming to Jamaica. We can tell you that for sure. It's more than a taxi service coming to Jamaica. It feels like a complete data insight, business model revolution to the space. So it's not just a tech company. We want to keep hearing more. So at this point, I'm going to ask Trevor, whose hand is up, to weigh in again at this point into the conversation.
Yeah, Sean. So again, I just wanted to again reiterate that what Uber is or has done is nothing new in Jamaica, because yes, like I said, there are services that existed before Uber, and there will be some that will come after Uber. But so it's not new, right? But what I wanted to kind of highlight again as it relates to know that the Ubers of the world are here. And you know, everybody, well, the taxi operators are screaming bloody murder, and they're now calling on government. One of the things that I think we really need to consider is, you know, again, the complexity of what has to be done yes, in order to manage this, because yes, one of the things in that article that we were quoted in, Sean, yes, one of the things I didn't put in that article was the fact that I had pointed out that there are two situations and scenarios that could easily prevail that could force certain types of decisions to occur. So here's the first one. The taxi operators, they have, I think, 2 or 3 collectives that they are part of. And you know, they do have a loud voice with government, and government typically responds to these these groups, and understand what happens if all of the taxi operators decide that they're going to stop providing service for a period of time. Now, understand, Uber does not have enough people on its platform yet to facilitate or to deal with that gap, right? So if all the taxi operators decide, so boy, we're not in this Uber thing, and them just say, until government does something, I'm gonna stop provide service, which can only last for so long because that affects their pocket as well.
That's right. That's right.
The thing about it is that action itself will trigger a reaction, right? Again, also remember that Uber's reach is not island wide.
Not as yet. It's Kingston,
as-
St. Catherine,
not
and
as-
Montego Bay.
Right. Just the broad, the wider corporate area, and I include St. Catherine in that, Portmore Day and St. Catherine. But so you have that kind of scenario that could play out. And in doing that, the government has to then make a decision on, what's the best action to take. And I don't think we should discount that possibility and what that could mean for not only Uber, but other services that are, that could possibly come to Jamaica, right? So it's always, useful to look at, what the effect of incumbents making noise, right, very loudly can have on the maintenance of the status quo, right? Now, the second thing is, which is something I really think needs to be interrogated by the authorities, is, look, why is it that our local taxi operators have not provided Uber-like services? Because the fact of the matter is they don't have any excuse to not provide it.
Yes.
And they have not been challenged to do so.
Yes.
Right. And Uber
until
comes
now.
at a
Until
time-
now.
Well, until now. But Uber comes at a time when one of the core parts of the services that they provide is a safety factor, right?
Yes.
And right now, that is not the norm for taxi operators here.
Yes.
Right? There are a lot of people who still do not feel safe. So one of the things, and I view this as an opportunity, right? One of the things government can do is now use the opportunity to challenge the incumbents to change the status quo and do better.
Yes.
Right? Because they don't have an excuse to not do better. And the fact is, if it is that we want to see better service from them, they must be challenged to do so, not only by the competition that's coming in the form of Uber, but from the government and the consumers that the government is supposed to ensure gets good service or gets protected, right? So I think there is an opportunity from that standpoint for the consumer to get even more out of the prevailing situation. So I think that is something that really needs to be discussed and thought through by the relevant authorities that say, look, you have no excuse now. All them jokey services that they're providing, it is clear.
Up your game, yes.
Up your game. Up your game. Yeah.
Up your game. Excellent point. Geoff, you ask where you want to win. Please do.
Just one last point in speaking, this could be an opportunity for the government to move some of the traditional revenue that occurs in this industry, right? drivers for a lot of organizations are simply renting a radio and dispatch services, right? So they're not really running the transactions through the company. They're doing them cash-based primarily. So it's not taxed, it's not part of any kind of reporting. And it's traditionally been because of the fact that they don't have the ability to track where the drivers are and the routes they're running. But I think with this introduction of technology, there could be a really interesting opportunity for the government in Jamaica to bring a lot of those cash type transactions into the mainstream, both for existing taxi companies and for Uber, to sort of get a higher, this could be used to leverage through government if they take the right mindset to actually drive forward a bunch of modernization that needed to happen anyways.
Exactly.
To move more income into the formal economy and out of the informal economy.
I fully agree with you. We have about 1 million citizens in Jamaica who are unbanked. And with an unbanked economy, it is also an opportunity to shift that space and to allow more of those small and medium-sized businesses to have access. So I really endorse what you have said there, Geoff, wholeheartedly. Extremely good point there. So you know what? There are 3 questions here that you have sort of answered in a significant way. The success and failure of mobile ride-sharing services, once they come under the influence of Uber, if it is done well and the business model work based on that, then it will thrive. If the only externality that you're suggesting is if people come together in social groups and want to have some social experiments to say that we do not want a service or otherwise. Government regularization of the service and how it treats it is also a part of the success factor. So I don't think we are actually debating anymore whether or not we should adopt. Uber is in Jamaica and we are using it. Uber was in Trinidad, right? And Uber-like services have been all over the region. George just indicated one is coming out next week or 2 to enter the market. I sincerely hope it's not bandwagonist and trying to figure out that they're just going to join because they have to think things through. But it's clear from what you have said so far, colleagues, the perception of the local transportation sector as it relates to these mobile ride sharing services is no longer a debate. It's an action that they need to undertake. It's no longer a debate if it's already here. They need to either change their game, become Uber-like in their service and provide a new user experience. Hey, Jeff, we use this term in computing, user experiences, but new customer experiences that will allow from the benefit of the shared ride. So I think we have captured those fairly well as points of conversation. Now, what I want to put back to the entire team of us is the security of the mobile ride sharing service. And I want to go there specifically. Mr. Sean Watson had brought it up also at the beginning, but I want to go there. And in the article that you and I had shared comment as well, Trevor, I actually highlighted this point in singularity. The security of the mobile ride sharing services. Are you saying that Uber, from where it is in its headquarters, wherever around the world, when it gives a local Jamaican taxi driver who might have been using on time and he moves from on time to Uber, or he gives Sean or Ketjoy because we have our own vehicle, we're going to this Uber-like service. What are the service level agreements relating to the security of the ride? How are they able to achieve that? What is it that they need to be doing to achieve that? Is there a link with the local police? Is there an app that is signaling the telecoms providers locally to respond to action, to talk to the police? What I'm not clear on is the framework, the security framework that guarantees the public that the ride is in fact secure. What I have heard anecdotally, Sheldon, based on my preliminary investigations about Trinidad, Art was not able to relate to it, is that in Trinidad, they actually had an incident where a user of an Uber ride in Trinidad actually had succumbed to some attack, and was one of the reasons why they had to pull out of the space. So I put it on the table squarely to us all, and Jeff, Lackland, all of us. How do we guarantee the security of these rides? What is Uber doing to ensure that it provides the security of these rides? And just throwing it out there. Trevor, I see the hand up to take it right away, and I defer to you. You can.
So here's the thing. First of all, Uber doesn't need to be here to make sure the ride is secure.
Yes.
You just need a number of things to be present.
Yes.
So that the person who is employing the service feels secure, right? And
yes.
if something prevails, then there is a way in which, one, you can determine who done it, and you can, you know, if you need to prosecute or detain or whatever, you can do that. No, and I mean, think about it. When a promoter having a session and him have parking half a mile from the venue and people have to walk from point A to point B, the only thing he needs to do is make sure that there is security along the way. But
yes.
that is no guarantee that one, you're
yes.
going to reach the location safely, or two, that your car not going to get robbed.
Yes.
Right. So let us just keep those things in perspective. Now, what the Uber platform has done, whether by accident or deliberately, it has brought a different type of service to the consumer in this country that this consumer is not used to.
Yes.
Right. So right now, prior to, you know, Uber becoming what it is now in Jamaica, anybody who call, even the taxi, that, you know, the taxi driver and so on, the fact of the matter is that same driver could have taken you away, do all manners of things to you.
Yes.
And there would be no record that
That's
could
right.
be tracked easily. Now, this is slightly different because the technology has provided a whole different paradigm that amounts to safety, quote
yes.
unquote, right? So people know who them driver is, people know the route that is being taken, and they can share that information with somebody else.
Yes.
Right? This doesn't need the interaction or of any telecommunications company, so to speak. It is the technology that is doing this. And the technology is creating that level of safety, whether it be real or perceived, but it also ensures that if something happens, there is some way that you know, somebody can be tracked. And I mean, this is coming on the heels of this young lady here, I forget her name, that was kidnapped, still not found.
Right, the one from UWI, the young lady.
Yes,
who, yes.
And think of what would have transpired if she had taken Uber, because that question is asked, right?
Yes.
So think about what would have happened to her if she had taken Uber.
Yes.
Right? Think of what would have happened if an Uber-like service is what she would have employed to find her way home.
Yes.
She would have found her way home.
That's a valid
because the people who are providing that service now know that they're being held accountable. Right? So if you're part of that service, the entire ecosystem that exists between driver and consumer invokes a feeling of safety. All right. So that is really just how that pans out. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So I think again, the technology is doing its job. What we probably are going to see a lot of talk around is the legality of the service itself.
Yes.
And how it plays in our space. And also the fact that a lot of people who are taking the Uber service themselves have never read the terms and conditions and the responsibilities that they have under this service, because some of the conditions that exist in Jamaica exist nowhere else. And the responsibilities that people have when they employ the Uber service, a lot of them are not aware of it, and they're not going to be until it reaches them. And when it reaches them, they'll have questions.
You have
And
questions.
then
So,
they're going to start saying, well, how does the government allow? And then we go back to why government do this, do that. Government not nothing to do with it. Because if you never read, then it's on you. Right?
okay. So this
So
presents
those are a
a
couple of the things
that you're seeing from a security perspective. But I'm going to throw it back out just in one more context, which we didn't think of, and probably those in the room who are abroad could also weigh in. The data that Uber has on a customer is
massive.
Under,
Big question. Big question.
Under the data protection. So therefore, even to get the insights and so on relating to what is that, because Uber, and I was alluding to it, Uber will have a large amount of insights about not only transportation, but many other things happening in Jamaica, density, population, etc., etc. I'm curious to know, and that was what I was trying to allude to in the article. But I will now have to write an article separately for the Gleaner this week or one of these other entities on this matter. What exactly happens in the US, Linkledln, and in Canada? Let us say a customer takes an Uber in Ottawa or down in the valley, and there is some violation of some sort. Is that data sequestered by the law enforcement to carry out an investigation? You're aware of how it works in your space, if you can relate to it?
Yes, I mean, and I go back to Facebook when I was at Facebook. I know if we see somebody do something illegal online, we'll actually provide that information to the law enforcement, to help in the investigation. So I'm assuming that Uber does the same thing. I've never seen it personally, but I think they have provision for that, where if something happens, they cannot actually provide that data to the legal community.
Oh, they have an obligation to, okay, they have an obligation to under the US law, but no, they're operating out of country and they are trans-border. So the issue would have to be, you're in Jamaica, you're a US company registered, let me say in the US, you're not registered in Jamaica. That's what we were discussing earlier. They don't have an office here. It's a technology, but you now have a breach where, for whatever it is worth, as Trevor said, security doesn't mean that it can't have a breach. You have a breach. What then becomes the legality of the breach and how the data is provided to support an investigation? I don't have an answer. When you say Trevor can't give an answer to
no. I can tell you, Sean, because this was one of the biggest discussion points that was underreported as related to some provisions in the data protection legislation. There was a group of us that were rather concerned that we wanted to have broader jurisdictional application of the data protection legislation, right? Now, currently, the data protection legislation applies only in Jamaica and to Jamaicans.
Okay.
Right, so to speak. I mean, it's putting it in ridiculously simple terms. But the thing about it is you ask a very pertinent question. What happens, if there is some sort of data breach that affects the Jamaican citizen? And what recourse does the Jamaican citizen have?
Yes.
And I will say to you right now that based on how things are operating, sir, the Jamaican citizens' recourse is highly questionable, right? Because again, the information that Uber collects on you, or that you provide to Uber, whether you're a driver or a consumer, is not subject to our laws.
Well, that is
let me ask a question.
Major issue there. We have a major one here. Welcome to Caribbean Technology Thought Leadership on a Sunday. It's a riveting conversation here about Uberization in Jamaica. Yes, Linkledln. Yes, Linkledln.
Yeah, so going back to your question about the data, where the data goes and stuff. I know in Europe, for example, whether it's Google or Facebook, they have to keep the European data in Europe, in data centers in Europe. Does
Yes.
Jamaica have that requirement that Uber will
No,
not?
that is not correct.
Okay.
That is not correct. The thing is, GDPR in its creation makes itself apply to European citizens wherever they are. So it don't matter where the data there. If you have data on a European citizen, that
In Jamaica.
regulation and those laws apply,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
That is how Europe treats with that. So it's not that you have to keep the stuff. And then, you know, with the modified safe harbor stuff again, you don't have to keep it in Europe. But the way they got around that was saying it don't matter where it's there, as long as you have information on a European citizen, this law applies. And you now will be held to account for that. We wanted to do something like that in the data protection legislation for Jamaica, where the law would apply outside of Jamaica for Jamaicans, right? So if Uber now had, because if you think about it, GDPR dictates that if Uber has information on European citizens, GDPR applies to them, right? So they could be held accountable for breaches, no matter where they're, right? This is not the same for Jamaica or Jamaican, right? And that's the challenge, because our law, when it becomes enacted officially or enforced, does not protect Jamaicans' data, anywhere it is.
Yeah,
it doesn't do that.
Yeah, just one more comment I want to make quickly. But I would suspect that Uber will be incorporated in Jamaica, though. I think most companies, even if they don't have an office, they still have a, incorporated.
Why would they need to?
That is the question. That is the question we don't know, and those are the questions I think government.
Hold on. So again, and I think Kestra asked it. Does anybody know if Uber is simply providing the service, or if there is a franchise that is taking care of that? Because technically, KFC, registered in Jamaica, KFC have a franchise holder out here. Burger King, same thing. Popeyes, same thing. Domino's, same thing, right? So Domino's now registered. The head office to Domino's is not in Jamaica.
I understand that, yeah, that part.
Right? So the thing about it is, okay, even in that case, that would have ramifications for the tax that Uber would pay, because if Uber is not registered here, and these are all questions that, like I said, I'm waiting for the first lawsuit to come out, because all of them questions are going to get answered at that, right? Mm-hmm. But those are the things that we have to think about, because the data that Uber collects on Jamaican people, if that is compromised in any way, right now Jamaican people not a recourse.
Well, I wouldn't want it to wait for a lawsuit, to be honest. I think there needs to be an answer to that question now, coming from the government, as a courtesy to the fact that the service is welcome by the public. So but therefore,
but you think if the government takes action that Uber won't file a lawsuit? I think a lawsuits have to come for iron out them things.
Yes.
What you guys should do is you should read the terms of service of Jamaica, though, for Uber, because what I noticed is that they use a corporation in Netherlands. They call it Uber BV, and it seems that's what it's tied to. So it's not
Uber BV.
Yeah, that's what I see here in the terms of service. So it seemed to be a European company, not a US company.
It's not registered in Jamaica.
It's very similar though, because LinkedIn, for example, in Canada is out of Ireland, right? So they do it to move and not have a tax nexus necessarily in the country, as Trevor was alluding to. So it will be contracted with some other jurisdiction outside of Jamaica, for anything that has to do with revenue, so they don't create a tax nexus. But
That's right. That's
they may
right.
have secondary ones that they use as service organizations locally that are able to do some of the other type of work they need to do, where they do need a local registration. So the revenue will flow through one organization externally, and then there'll be a second entity that will deal with some of the other things. That's a fairly
Right.
common structure for them to use. And,
Yep.
and going back to the DPA, one of the big problems we do have with the US, and it's a similar problem they have with Canada, is that there's acts like the Patriot Act, or at least what was the Patriot Act, and similar legislation that allows the US government access data that is in the US, right? So if you're transiting the US, or if the data is stored in the US, the government has certain rights to be able to access that data under certain circumstances, which is why even when the GDPR Act itself maybe not be may be applicable to people in different jurisdictions, why Canadian government and certain organizations require the data to be resident in Canada is because they're avoiding having the US government have access to that data. And similarly for Jamaicans who have their information in Uber now, if that data is resident in the US, it gives the US government access to that data. You can only look back to historical things, like when they were trying to get the extradition of it was Dudas Coke or other things, where if they could access on sovereign US soil data about the whereabouts of people in other countries, you can start to see where that would be a pretty scary situation, because they have the right to it, right? So you're agreeing in your license agreement to have them store the data there, so there really is no recourse. But the government then, because it just stored it in the US, they have the ability to work with that data in ways that perhaps the government in Jamaica or other countries wouldn't be as happy with, despite the protections offered by DPA or other legislation.
Yeah, and now you start to see the complex nature of what the government has to deliberate when it's contemplating what they have to deal with when they're deciding how to treat with Uber, because it's not only about ride sharing. It's a whole bunch of other things that have to be considered.
Definitely so. So on this point, I'll take Sheldon and Ket Joy and Sheldon on the next point on this. Thank you so much. Excellent point there, Geoff. Excellent point, Trevor. Yes.
Is it Geoff or Jeff?
Well, I tend to. Okay, it's Jeff.
It's Jeff. It's the British pronunciation.
It's Jeff.
Spend some time down here. It's so like you spend some time down here. I know some history, man.
No, man, he travel from Kingston to Portmore and all of those places. You know Portmore better than you. I can tell you that.
Yeah, but I mean, when I brought up initially when we started out, and I brought up DPA, the GPA and Data Protection Act, and I spoke about the emerging markets and why it is that companies like this, these tech companies, these virtual companies, I would call them global virtual companies, they are attracted to emerging markets for the same reasons we are discussing here now.
Yes.
They have found our vulnerabilities.
Yes.
While we try to wrap our heads around the thing, they're cleaning up.
Yes.
And we have to now catch up. And I mean, yes, we are vulnerable because we're emerging markets, but first world countries are also catching up. Yes. And there are other first world countries who pander to these virtual companies like the Irelands of the world, who give them tax havens.
And Bermuda.
And legal havens. It's like a cruise ship. If you know the analogy of the cruise ship business, you might go on Caribbean cruise at Miami, but they're flying a Peru flag, and if you drop off that thing in the Atlantic, you have no recourse. Yes, so it's the same kind of model. Their model is not new. They've basically co-opted a cruise ship model, in my estimation, and taken it into the tech revolution. It's smart. It's beautiful. Smart. It's and beautiful. A few of you here are university lecturers. Whoever is writing the next business book,
yes,
please make sure that it is so written that these things are covered. Because I'm using loss leading, and I just find out from Linkledln that it named blitz scaling. That's not it.
As a matter of fact, it looks like it is probably Dr. Campbell and myself. And some of us here might be the writers of the book. Not to worry. I'll have to co-opt us all into it because I've already thought about that.
Yes,
So
there is no playbook anywhere for
Yeah.
what is happening. The tech revolution moves so quickly.
Yeah.
Not even our legislators
Keeping
can
up.
long
Yeah.
enough to even bring a white paper for this.
Yes. Definitely so. I fully concur. It's
By the time you agree on something, because it's some ways away now. Here comes something like Uber to
yes.
exploit another loophole. And I don't even know if this country is graduating attorneys that can argue.
No, I probably don't have a clue yet. I can't tell you
Don't
that.
have a clue. They can't argue.
Yes, that is true.
They're not so inclined. No, there's no specialization for that.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of things that we need to do in this Caribbean region to protect ourselves as well as to move ourselves forward and not be left behind with traditionalist thinking and hoping that they will just hurry up and feed and leave. I noticed there's another Watson trying to come in and he's more able to argue this point than
Is another Watson coming in? I don't know.
I wouldn't say we don't have legal minds down here that can argue these things. We do. We have a couple of them who can.
Yeah.
So they're there.
We need more.
They're there.
I have a question though, as it relates to what we're discussing now, the Data Protection Act. That for some time I've been doing some research on the act, and there may be some recourse now based on Section 3B, Section 3(1)(b)(b). Based on how I interpret it, at least, I think we do have some form of recourse, because it says, except as otherwise provided for in Section 60, this act applies to a data controller in respect of any personal data only if the data controller, though not established in Jamaica, the processes personal data of a data subject who is in Jamaica, and the processing activities are related to the monitoring of the behavior of data subject as far as the behavior takes place within Jamaica. My interpretation of that is that they do have some recourse. A Jamaican citizen do have some recourse based on what it's saying.
Yeah, man, I hear you. So
yeah, I'm saying based on the act. I'm reading the act.
Yeah,
so it's 3(1)(b)(b).
I kind of want to weigh in here. I kind of
I want to shut down. Yes, I want. Okay.
Yeah, man. But one more things I want to comment on. The problem is, being we're a small country with limited resources. The bigger countries have actually been taking on the platform companies. I know Canada is putting some kind of controls and rules on the Facebook. China has long been doing that. There are instances where the tech companies, such as Google, has threatened the smaller companies to withdraw their services. And I know that is something that Jamaica is right. But at the time back, there was some debate on net neutrality. I know, but certainly my view is from a long time ago that data is a new oil. And actually, what does that mean? I remember when I was CIO at GMMD, I remember importing an accounting software, and it was on CD at the time. And customs held it, wanted to charge me 20% duty along with the GCT. And it was unusual for me because usually I bring in hardware and I pay the usual thing, but it was just a CD. And I said to them that, you know that I can download the software. And the vendor just chose to send this to me, right? And I said, well, because it comes in through the ports, I have to pay the 20% and the 15%. I said, well, tell the truth, it doesn't make any sense because actually when I checked with my team, they already downloaded it already. It was a courtesy the vendor was sending me on a CD. right? So I think in terms of where we are in terms of cloud technology, I mean, the telecom industry has totally gotten wiped out in terms of its revenue because they're charging for on minutes, and then you have the WhatsApp and whatever, all these other things coming on board now that people are using, and now of course most people spend money on data. So the thing is that if we as a country, and I'll go back to this other point, I want to hear Trevor's point of view because it's about 3 or 4 years ago. As a country, we know what data when people are using Uber, we know when they're using Netflix, we know that when they're using Facebook, right? We know when companies are subscribing to data services overseas, pulling out their credit card, using a lot of cloud-based servers and all of that. So there is going to come a time when people have to really look at it and say, okay, what are you using the data for, right? And then that way, you could probably force these companies then into paying some kind of taxes or something for us in Jamaica utilizing their service. I've also always felt that way, and I'm still seeing coming out more and more because the platform economy is here to stay, right? People are going to be able to offer their services anywhere in the world without registering a physical company. They are like Jamaica to start making use of that. So I think there's another way in which we must be able to make sure the country actually benefits from these platform economies earning money from your own citizens.
No, I agree with you.
Point.
I agree with you 100% on that, Sheldon. I mean, the talks have been rolling around not only in Jamaica but in a whole bunch of other countries regionally, because it is a real problem. Because, you know, and in fact, I think it was either Colombia or Venezuela who were playing around with a method of being able to collect money before it even left their jurisdiction, so to speak, of these overseas or outer country big tech companies. They open itself up to a lot of other privacy questions and concerns, but the conversations have been there. I think what tends to happen sometimes is when you think about, and again, it's fear, right? Some people just don't understand, you know, how certain systems work. But one argument you'll hear is like, well, gee, why would you even want to go and move the needle with a Facebook when Jamaica's population is you know, minuscule compared to Facebook's membership? So if Facebook decides, say, you know what, we're just going, you know, kill service to Jamaica, what would the impact of that be? Those are some of the questions people ask, and you know, it's like again, these are things that you know, government and you know, enterprise has to contend with. So you know, I do believe we need to find a innovative way of handling that, which is why again I said this whole Uber thing will bring back that conversation at a more serious level, because we need to understand that and how we keep the money at home, right?
Yes.
The second thing I just wanted to touch on had to
Sean's question
as it relates to the data protection legislation, right?
Yes.
So I have to go again, pull it back up, and there are two things you have to look at in the legislation. It's the process, well, the standards. There are 8 of them, and 2, as you relate to section 3, and you know, section 3B, B is what you're referring to. When you read B, you know, it says, you know, outside of what section 60 says, this act applies to a data controller in respect of any personal data only if the data controller, and you know, you got to be, though not established in Jamaica, uses equipment in Jamaica for processing the personal data otherwise than for the purpose of transiting through Jamaica, which, you know, kind of speaks to that issue with America that some countries have. processes personal data of a data subject who is in Jamaica and the processing activities related to that. Now, the thing about that is you have to now interrogate what the definition of a data controller is, right? And this is what gets a lot of people. The data controller is clearly defined in the Act, and what you have to establish is whether or not Uber is a data controller, right, or not. And I would easily submit to you that you could argue that Uber is not a data controller in this case. And like I say, you can argue that, right? Because when you look at the definition for what a data controller is, it's very clear what a data controller should do. But there's also, a line that is typically drawn between a data processor, a data controller, and a data subject. And you need to look at the definitions and the thin line between what a data processor is, a data controller, and a data subject, right? And when you look at those definitions, then you can see that you could easily argue that Uber is not a controller. And as such, Section 3 would be in question.
So not to cut it in, Trevor, Jeff just sent me a note here indicating that on Uber's website, the legality and arbitration is done in the Netherlands. So if you have any, if you go to Uber Legal, Sean, the argument now is that if a Jamaican who is driving in an Uber taxi or vehicle need any arbitration, it is done in the Netherlands. So that's food for thought right there. Thanks for that interjection, Jeff. Very, very useful point. I didn't know that. It's more food for thought there. Really thank you for that. Yes, Trevor, you're finishing up the point.
Yeah, so because let me give you an example. So Digicel, right? Digicel uses third-party vendors to do, or I'm not sure they still do, but I think they still do, uses third-party vendors to do payment processing for them. All right, now, even though that third party is the one that's in custody of the information, they are not considered the data controllers, right? They're considered the processors. Yes. And as such, they are not held accountable for information breaches and so on. Something that's closer to home and more recent. The Jam COVID app, right? Understand that the Amber Group, they are not the data controllers of that information. Right? It's the government of Jamaica. Yes. They simply provided the app and the service for that. Yes. So technically, when somebody's going to sue, they don't sue Amber because the law doesn't hold the data processor liable. Yes. They sue the government of Jamaica.
It's a controller.
Right? Because they are the controller. Now, let us look at Uber, right? Uber is providing a service to a contractor. Right? And when you book via this app, in terms of terms and conditions you have never read, and it could easily be argued that Uber is simply processing information for the contractor, who is a driver, who comes and picks you up, right? So there are a whole lot of, that's why I said the first legal challenge that is brought in this particular situation will answer a lot of questions, because it's not until the law is challenged that you get precedents and clear interpretational arguments about these things.
I think one of the things it provides, and to not to hold up this queue of hands that I see up, I think a little bit of a research now needs to be done on what has happened in other jurisdictions for which Uber has been brought to court in any such similar circumstances. I think from an academic standpoint, that is the opportunity I'm seeing with respect of this point. You know, so I take note of what you have said there, Trevor.
Absolutely. You're correct.
Excellent conversation so far. I'm really going to give Dr. Campbell a chance to weigh in before I pass it back to Ketjo, who I see his hand is up. And I see also Sheldon's hand is up. But Dr. Campbell, please weigh in. But this is definitely.
Okay, I just wanted to weigh in on a few points that have passed me by. The first one had to do with the question of whether government should intervene and take Uber to court in any matter whatsoever.
Yes.
We must recognize that government is a signature to a lot of WTO treaties. And under WTO rules, if government start doing anything to inhibit trade, then that has a whole lot of repercussions, which the likes of it we wouldn't want to see happen. Therefore, government has to tread very carefully the way they deal with these international and multinational organizations, right? So it is easier for private parties to or groups within the country to challenge and government watch and observe and strengthen its laws to protect its citizens eventually. But for government to take that kind of posture, to be aggressive towards business, will be seen as anti-business. So that has to be their approach, I think. Another one in terms of our expertise or local expertise, well, we know Georgia has been one of the forerunners there.
Yes, Georgia Henley.
Yes, but we need a lot of technical people to do alternate training in the law, so that they can be versed in it, because we do need the expertise. I for one don't really think that we can as a country try to battle on all the fronts. We have to choose where we want to compete and defend that. I always felt that Jamaica is a country of traders, and because we are a country of traders, we should have had the best university that writes all these trade rules and trade laws and people who want to get degrees and expertise in trade and trade manifest and all that kind of stuff should be coming to Jamaica to get that. And how we do it is give our salesmen virtual briefcases to go all over the world and sell our products. And they just pass through us. That most of them don't even land here, just like what we see happening in Netherlands. The next one relates to we talk about how do we engage big tech companies. I think that there's room for smaller entities to form coalitions and engage these parties in multi-party negotiation.
Mm-hmm.
And if we do that, then we coalesce around points that or issues that we all have common interest, then we can get value out of it. But to go it alone against any of them is a lost case. But we can try a multi-party negotiation and go in the route of coalitions. All right, that's my 2 penny.
Some very thoughtful comments, Dr. Campbell, and it's overarching to understand that Uber, the implications of Uber is now, even in this conversation this evening, is far more than talking about transportation. Look how long we have spent on the issue just of the security and the data protection. So I'm very mindful of these points, and the fact that I'm now thinking that we might have to have a follow-up, but I'll have to tell you when in the series we'll do the follow-up, because I would love to see 3 or 6 months from now where all of this is going with Uber. and how we are reacting as a country. This is Caribbean Technology Thought Leadership, and this is definitely food for strong discussion on a Sunday evening. I think we have done well as it relates to speaking to the regulation. It's almost a moot point now, because data protection is coming to the top of the stack as it relates to how the issues of the technology ride sharing is to be impacted. I will argue that even if other services want to now come behind Uber, and if there are other services like Uber that were operating in Jamaica, they have actually had lackluster in this space because of the sheer impact that Uber brings to the market, being a global player compared to no-name type players. So I think that's a big wow factor here, big tech factor. So we will defer on what we see government regulation should be, but I know I'll be writing one of the upcoming articles on the issue of the data protection and Uberization going forward, and what that means based on some of these very conversations we are having this evening. I'm going to move to the two last questions in a moment in terms of the impact of what you see this mobile ride sharing has to do with Jamaica, and what you think are some of the research areas we should now be jumping into to adjust or pivot as a people. But I saw Kate Joy's hand up. I don't know if it was from up earlier. Oh, and Trevor's hand. Are these hands up from earlier? Can I do? They were?
I can speak to the question coming up.
Okay, to the question coming up. Well, we're always going to give the ladies first preference. You know, we're very mindful of that. So these are very useful conversations so far, and we'll be writing on some articles coming out of it for the public. So we have done well as it relates to regulation. I think data protection is coming up big, and I will want to do some studies as to what has been taking place in Canada and the US and elsewhere as it relates to how the regulation has been manifested. I think Trevor is going to come back to Joint Select Committee and these places for some deliberation. So when you say government, the same people who are making the input to inform government, it will come back to the same table. So the last two questions of the evening, before we wrap up the Sunday brunch here on Caribbean Technology Thought Leadership, and please don't forget to leave your posts and comments at the end of the session on your thoughts. What's the wider impact of this Uberization? I'm going to take the word now as I got it earlier in the call this evening. This Uberization that we see happening is more than technology adoption. It has a wider impact on the economy. What says your view? And I'll take it around the table, and including those of like Linkledln and Jeff as well. But I'm going to defer to Mrs. Watson to take the first punch at this one. What do you think is the wider impact of this thing?
As I don't like the word, but I'm going to use it.
Yeah, yes.
Uberization that you're talking about. I am going to approach the answer from a sociological standpoint.
I welcome that.
Economics is born out of sociology.
Yes.
So I can speak to it. And what I see happening with these big tech companies like Uber, like Twitter, like Facebook, they have the capacity to change your culture so rapidly. Usually, cultures don't change until a few generations pass. But because of how real-time information and how you communicate these days, the rapidity of it changes your culture virtually overnight. So take ourselves out of the pandemic. The introduction of a company like this fosters a greater expectation for how we move around the country, the level of safety that we now expect. We always needed it, but we never demanded it of our traditional companies until this new company came into the economy, came into our culture and our space, and offered it on a silver platter. So immediately, anybody coming there after, this is the new standard. And this happened overnight, literally overnight. And we're talking about the young lady from UA she's now long gone as far as we know. But her situation is not topical because a company like Uber is almost guaranteeing rider safety, because we can now see a picture of the person coming, what kind of car he's coming in, the route he's going to take us to get to where we want to go. So it gives us some level of safety. But on the flip side, gentlemen and old lady's gone. These same companies are the ones who were instrumental in driving change in countries that didn't want any change because they were fine with the status quo. Countries like Venezuela under Chavez, it is argued that Twitter enabled that revolution because they were able to gather and protest at a drop of a hat. Just tweet out the location and they all gathered and they protested. And by the time the police reach there, they tweet another location and they're gone like a flash mob. We're talking about the Arab Spring, where people were able to galvanize support to overthrow a government that was in power nearly 30, 40 years overnight by using Facebook. And this is one of the reasons why non-democratic countries refuse access to these international companies, because it will alter your culture. And if you are okay with the status quo and you want no disruption in the way things are done, you bar access. But in barring access, you also stifle your economy. So it's a balancing act. How much of this do you allow? Do you have any power over preventing them from coming? We don't have the wherewithal to block a Facebook and a Twitter yet. So they will come. So now we are put in a position, our government is put in a position where they now have to negotiate with these third parties while they occupy our economy and our culture, and try and figure out how we can monetize their intrusion into our space. These are things we have to grapple with. But while we grapple with it, public perception will change. Somebody said that the government will have to put in legislation regarding safety and whatnot. No, market forces will do that. Market forces will do that. And if the traveling public determines they can take a ride for $200 less and be guaranteed safety, legislation won't make it safer. That company will simply go out of business, the one that can't offer what the competitor has put on the table. So we will see a rapid change in our culture. Yes, brought on by this pandemic for nearly 2 years now. We sit and watch our food come to us. We binge watch all the shows we haven't watched before. Not a dime has been paid to the Honorable Mr. Clark. And government will continue to be reactive until we can catch up, if we ever do.
Excellent point. Excellent. So the culture, we'll see a culture shift. That's what you're saying, Mrs. Watson, and definitely something to look at from an anthropological, what do you call it? Anthropology point of view.
Sociological, anthropological
point of view. Excellent point. I want to hear any more views on this. I do have a view. I think it's going to decimate the current local space. I was here waiting on Amazon to come to Jamaica, but with Uber forcing them in this regard, what it could mean is how even our mail services are used, local shuttle rides like the thing there, the Knoxville Express. I can think about a whole set of sector disruptions in terms of logistics and supply chain movement. Uber could represent the answer to that. I think it will generate, it will have short-term shocks in the economy, short to medium-term shocks in the economy for employment, which could become long-term if we work out a model for its sustainability. These are some of the things I see. It's going to push more collaboration in the market for how we work. You may have the Uber-like eats, which could decimate what we have as Crave and all these other products, meaning it can either decimate them or those companies will seek to Uberize or re-Uberize, if we can make those words. But these are some thoughts going through top of my head. It's an opportunity of major shift. I might have to write the next short book about this one so I don't lose the legacy of it. Boy, the hands are going up left, right, and center. This is Caribbean technology thought leadership. I will make comparisons to what happens in the US and Canada and so on, and see if I can get something out before the end of the year on this Uberization of the Caribbean economies. I'm declaring that on Caribbean Technology Thought Leadership on a Sunday evening, June 27, 2021. Well, I like the hands going up. I don't know where to choose from with hands now.
I can go first.
You can go first, Larkland. Yes, Larkland, go, please, yes.
No, so to answer your question, there are a few points I can make here. The first one is around service quality, right? So basically
Yes.
what we're saying here is that with the mobile services, you can improve the overall availability of services in terms of response time, quality, that kind of thing, right? So
Yes.
it increases competition, so increase better service for users. So the customers will benefit. Jamaicans in overall will benefit from it, whether it's an overseas company or a local company, because the competition is driving a better quality of service in that sense, right? The second point is about safety, because Uber now comes with good safety features, right? The ability to, I think they check driver background as well. I do a background check as well to make sure the driver is, qualified in that sense. So they check that, they have all the map information, all that stuff. So they improve safety right off the bat over a local taxi, right? So that kind of thing will drive the industry towards incorporating those capabilities, right? And then the third thing I want to say is that if you're a taxi guy, if you're a poor guy, you can't buy a taxi license, right? You can't afford to buy a taxi. You're now able to get access to a car. Maybe somebody might lend you a car they're not using. And now you can earn an income on Uber or similar service. So I think this gig economy is part of the gig economy, right? So what it's going to do is going to change the economic model from very few players who control the economy to more, a wider range of players, so to speak, So I think those are the 3 points I want to make about this question.
Excellent point there, Larkland, because it is in fact a part of the gig economy. I will, and listen, I tell you, this conversation, we might think it, it's just a measure of a call in a conversation. Well, it's a really large conversation we're keeping this evening. I'm going to take it out. Sheldon, Trevor, I'm going to give you the last say on this matter. I'm going to give Trevor the last say.
Yeah, so
Sheldon and then Annette. Yes.
In terms of it's clear that Uber coming overall is a net positive for Jamaica. As I said, I'm disappointed that we couldn't do this for our own people. But another culture shift that I see happening, which is necessary. I mean, when I go to certain cities across the world, including the States, there are a lot of people who have actually given up driving their personal cars and taking Uber, and they've worked it out, and they say it's actually more economical for them to take Uber than to drive their own cars. And I've met a number of young people that have been actually doing this. Now, I do say I could even imagine myself on certain days when I want to come into and let me just say Kingston. I'm in Kingston, but you guys understand with the traffic on the road, that if I could, call a safe ride sharing service, and I know that within 10-15 minutes, wherever I am, I can be picked up and dropped off from where I go. It's probably more not only economical, but I could imagine the car is comfortable. and they have Wi-Fi, I could actually still be working. So the culture change is going to come in many, many different ways, and it can be positive, right? I still want to see how it is though, that some of these things that we see that comes forth as a result of the gig economy, that how as Jamaicans that we can be participating, creating some of these and utilizing these applications instead of just being the usual consumers of these applications. But end of the day, I mean, I've been having mixed feelings, as you know, Dr. Thorpe, in terms of Uber coming, but at the same time, I do see all the net benefits that we're going to be getting in Jamaica.
Definitely. This is Caribbean Technology Thought Leadership, where we put some salient matters on the table. Uberization, the technology disruptor for 2021 for transportation. Is it or is it not? I continue to take the cues here. Dr. Campbell, followed by Trevor.
Okay, just want to wrap up. Just want to respond to what I said about Mr. Clark, the Honorable Mr. Clark collecting, not getting a cent. Mr. Clark is a public servant, right? He doesn't collect any money. So let us be clear about that, because people listen to our podcast. It's the Ministry of Finance that collects the taxes. He's just a custodian. All right. So that said, I see cultural disruptions from what is going on in terms of the big techs focusing on small economies like Jamaica. And as cultural disruption takes place, it is for us to not just create and adopt these technology as they are in the developed nations or in nations where the parent company originate. But if we are able to find the uniqueness about our space, and our space, I believe, is the Caribbean itself, because we have so much of our history that that binds us. That kind of cultural disruption I'm talking about, if we focus on those aspects of what is unique about us in terms of our safety, our security, how do we communicate those values? How do we enforce those? If we can regain some of those in our lives through the use of technology, then we have a good thing. We can start challenging even some of these big tech companies. I don't, for one, believe that culture is so fickle and easy to change, because culture is literally drilled into our DNA, and it's going to take a lot to disrupt it out of our being, and therefore, as a computing professional, as an academic, when a student comes to us with an idea, and I would like to develop the next best technology to disrupt an industry, one of the questions that I generally tend to ask them is, have you looked at the social dimension? Have you spoken to the people who will be using the application? What are their feelings about it? Will they likely adopt it? Is it going to change them in a significant way that they are uncomfortable and they will not support it? So it goes back to what I think I heard Kate Joy said earlier about the technology being I don't want to misquote. But in the initial, when we started talking this evening, when we were talking about how the technology could disrupt the way we do things, my honest response to how technology disrupts us is that we must always investigate and ask people's perception of how the technology is changing them. We must try and mesh that technology into those perceptions. And if we can do that, then they are likely to better adopt the technology and even change it and innovate from there. But if they see it as something that is foreign, that is being imposed on them, they're not likely to be receptive to it. So that's the way I think that I see technology being a disruptor, affecting us in the near future.
Excellent point, Dr. Campbell. And Trevor, you have the word on this one.
Well, I mean, first of all, well, I'm looking at it from various angles, but first of all, I think this whole Uber thing is, ultimately it's a good thing, right? Because it does cause so many questions to be asked, because, caused us to start to see what is possible from a service offering standpoint. I think, if anything, and I share, even Sheldon's view that it would have been nice if these things could have come from here, but it speaks to some things that we need to do to boost and bolster some of the local things that do the same thing that these big entities do, right? So there is obviously some work that needs to be done there. But I also think that at a national level, it's going to be very interesting to see how the incumbents, the taxi operators, how the government, the legislators treat with what Uber has unearthed, because again, for the longest while, we've known that technology continues to outpace our legislation, but we're talking now business models that are shedding a light on the insufficiencies of some of our laws, right? So I think it's going to be a very interesting next year or two as it relates to this particular situation, because it's going to set the precedent for what happens going forward, not only for local, innovation and local entities, but foreign investment that may want to come here. I want to see, and I think it's gonna spark some heated discussion about, the whole big tech tax thing that I was talking about, and we need to figure out how to treat with that, because it is a real thing, and I think this will serve to at least elevate that conversation. So I think, and I don't think we've seen, I mean, and anybody can correct me if I'm not mistaken, I don't think we've seen any disruption of this kind of generate this kind of interest since Digicel, right? Came to Jamaica.
That is true.
So,
that is very true.
Oh God.
And it's sparking a lot of interest, a lot of discussion, and I think what lays ahead will whatever happens to Uber, it will fundamentally change certain basic things and services that we have become used to, or that we will start demanding, and I think the ultimate beneficiary will be the consumer. So I think this is a good thing. This type of disruption is a good thing. A lot of stuff will come out of it. I'm just, sitting back and watching in interest to see how some
we're
things
all
are handled.
game. We're all game. We're all game for this one. We're all game.
Watching how some things will be handled here. You hear the rumblings, but you want to see how things are actually handled. Because it is at that time you start to see, okay, these are the challenges of moving in that direction for us as a little country. And it's going to be a very interesting learning experience coming out of it.
Definitely, and we'll put something in the form of a book out. I'll not make bones about that, So I'll start to draft it from later. So by Christmas we have the first volume. All right, that's a good one. Right. Definitely, man. Definitely. So the hands are still up and coming. Jeff, you have the floor at this point. Please, you can comment.
I just wanted to maybe make a lighter note on the topic. We talk a lot about innovation and coming from technology, but what I'd be curious about, we've seen early evidence of it where, for example, Uber drivers would collectively go offline to drive a surge in the rates that were being charged, and they come back online to take advantage of the surge pricing. So what I think we might find, and it might be a very interesting experience, is to see how the brains of Silicon Valley have put together a system and innovated, but I would hardly say that they're up against a formidable foe here in the form of the Jamaican taxi man when it comes to figuring out an innovative way to get around the limits placed by a system to find some kind of advantage, right? How to bend the rules and how to figure out how to actually work around a system like Uber to maximize their own personal benefit. And I think it's actually going to be an interesting battle, because I don't know that they have yet come across a group as creative and as innovative at sort of working around systems as they will find with the Jamaican taxi man.
Definitely. Very useful points indeed, and I love where this is going. Definitely. Dr. Campbell, is your hand back up? Garth, I don't know if you have anything you want to weigh in on this as well. Dr. Campbell, I see your hand back up. Please wait if you're going to say something, or it was up before.
Yeah, I should have taken it down.
Oh, okay. All right. So based on this impact, the impact studies we don't even begin the impact studies. And as Trevor said a while ago, and as you said, Jeff, we would love to see what happens by now and the next year or so. But I think by the end of the year, we should have a first volume of a written compendium so we can share with the public and on the views of this. It would hate to waste the opportunity here. But in saying all of this though, I'm seeing where all of this affects even small, medium-sized businesses that will need to pivot and potentially pivot in the Uber way, for argument's sake, in an Uber way. So I'm now contending as the academic here. What are some of the type of research studies you think that this should be putting on the table for small and medium-sized enterprises, for us in the academia, for government? Put on a little bit of a scholarly hat for a moment. I'm asking you all, and tell me what would be your number one, or one, two, three priorities that you think research can unearth that helps us move this conversation forward, that by the end of the year or a year's time or 2 years' time, we can measurably say, well, okay, this is what Uber meant to our space. Because we have to write the Caribbean narrative. That is my viewpoint. We who are speaking in forums like this, and after we move from the forums, we should have something documented to reflect the narrative of what we can do, what we have done, and how we make lives better for us as Jamaican, as Caribbean people. But I'm opening the floor on this very last point. What are some of the pivot studies by way of research and otherwise you think we should now be engaging in?
I would say one point I would think I could research around is distribution of wealth. because obviously,
Distribution of wealth, yeah.
yeah, for economic growth, you need more people to be participating in the economy. So would the gig economy or Uber drive better distribution of wealth, you know, move away from centralized, you know, few people controlling the world to more people participating, that kind of thing.
Excellent point. Excellent. So you see some level of redistribution of the wealth, and that in itself would need careful assessment of. You know, I'm curious on that point, Linkledln. I mean, if the studies are showing in the US and in Canada and elsewhere that since Uber, a lot more people are earning income. That would be interesting to know. I'll have to go and research it myself. And if you have found any information, you're a very information-driven man like myself, I would definitely welcome that data. But that's a very, very constructive and instructive point. So I do appreciate it.
I do,
yes.
Dr. Thorpe.
Yes.
I think in terms of the demand for Uberization for small businesses, I mean, they may not quite understand it, but as I said, you know, being a part of ends, and I mean the pizza companies like the Domino's, I mean they're actually a transportation company. I mean the pizza itself coming here within 45 minutes is a result of they have all these bike men on the road that you know, they're taking into consideration the time, putting the pizza in the oven and the delivery cost. So when you go into the Domino's or you have it delivered, it's the same price, right? What has happened with ends is a lot of people now looking to have their goods being delivered, and it's not only for food. And when we envision ends, it was for anybody. It could have been hardware stores, it could be even it's even a clothes store, right? The thing is that we don't have the logistics kind of thought through in this country. But I would imagine if, for example, if more and people become online, and there's a way in which the cost for delivery, in many cases, it could be absorbed by the business because it is economical to them, which is what Amazon has done. Amazon has a lot of goods that you buy on Amazon. I mean, at least getting it to your freight forward, it's at least is free in many cases. So I think there is an opportunity where the cost for transportation, because of a sharing economy, can actually go down significantly, which would allow more profits to the business, small business, which you spoke about, and maybe they may even end up passing on those savings to the consumer. All right, so it would facilitate a lot more true e-commerce happening, just like what we're seeing now with the restaurants in terms of food delivery. But whether it's just, as I said, what hardware store, clothing, whatever it may be, because we have platforms that has Uber that allow ride sharing.
Excellent point. This is excellent point. Jeff, then followed by Garth.
One of the questions I would have, and this is something maybe to look into, is whether or not, I don't believe Uber has a program necessarily to allow academics access to some of the data they have, anonymized.
That is correct. That is correct.
But that seems to me that they have both demographic and transportation data be very important for urban planning and other purposes that academics could leverage, especially if they're, as part of the government's negotiation to have them enter the market would be perhaps to negotiate some form of access, whether, for researchers to use that data for important,
excellent point. As a matter of fact, since it came out last week, I actually had a discussion with the JCS current president about doing a research study on that. And let me share, because Jeff, you're a software developer, hands down. What I'm doing as we speak tonight, I have a first iteration of a software tool coming out that does self-reporting about mobile ride-sharing services in Jamaica. So it's looking at, it's a freemium. We're gonna put it up, sharing it with the communities like the JCS and all on ourselves to evaluate this freemium tool. So it will do a level of comparative analysis on different ride-sharing services, taxis, public taxis, rent-a-share services, public transportation, and Uber. For 3 of the parishes. So we are very aware that we don't have any such access So we want to build a complementary tool to see if the Jamaican public, especially those who will be taking the Uber or who have been taking it, will fill that out to help us learn or glean some insights. So that's a project study that is in progress. But I am going to take what you say further and discuss this with Uber. Possibly we should find out about it, or the government should help us find out about it. Yeah.
If the government can help with that, because again, when you start talking about things like JTC route planning, like the type of data that will come, assuming the taxi industry responds with some form of also data collecting app, I mean, the ability to aggregate that data to get social good out of it for Jamaicans would be really quite powerful. But it's not going to come naturally because they don't want anyone to have that access to that data. They're going to consider it to be proprietary, competitive intelligence, right? So
that's correct.
But it could be something that in the right hands of the government to push to have some of that aggregated data available to improve the services to Jamaicans and to add insight from the academic community.
Definitely. I will involve you in a stand-up presentation of the tool design, which is going to be available, because we think it's a national good project. So I appreciate that comment indeed, along with all the others so far. Definitely very good points on what you're thinking there. Trevor, I see your hand is up as well. Go ahead, please.
I think my hand was up from before. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I should have taken it down.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I missed Garrett. My apologies.
Again, you have done it. Following on the heels of what Jeff says about access to the data that could really constitute a proper study, you went on in and answered that question as to whether or not we'll be able to get good enough data from the traveling population, those who use the service here.
Yes.
And just, how willing would persons be to provide that information?
Yes. So I have a pilot tool. It should be ready within the hour. The developer just finished working on it in MS Azure, and it's a self-reporting tool, and we want to move it from that to a potential chatbot service. So we're moving like lightning speed, and I will definitely present it to the JCS community and team of developers like yourselves and so on in companies, and get some feedback about it. So if we can give it to government and say, government, please make this available to the Uber rideshare service, so that for every time they complete the Uber ride and fill out that particular survey that Uber requests when you leave their vehicle, we can have something that allows the Jamaican community to have as feedback as well from these reporting tools. So I'll be launching that very shortly. But the tool that design is 1 week now we're working on it, and it's ready. Draft of it is ready. So definitely I will probably bring that back into us at the advisory boards, Garrett, and do some presentations on the intention. So really thank you for those comments. Linkledln?
Yes, so as I said about research that the academic community could do.
Yes.
You could look at how it disrupt other industries as well. You could look at the rent-a-car industry, car ownership, as in terms of dealers, because I know here in the US, Uber itself is also a dealer as well. I mean, Uber.
Uber is a dealer? What are you saying to me?
What I'm saying is they help with car acquisition. What they do is that they have arrangement with the manufacturers and stuff to acquire cars and stuff for drivers. So what I'm saying is that it may disrupt the auto,
completely.
Yeah, in that sense, right? So
completely. No, yeah. I didn't even think about that one. Colleagues, they thought about that one. We have so much used car dealers in Jamaica. Them already struggling to figure out how they're going to sell used cars in the market. We are saying that Uber could decimate that market?
In two ways, Uber could help to acquire drivers for the drivers, as well as people may not necessarily need to own a car anymore, because now they have the ability, especially if you live in a place like San Francisco, for example, or New York City, you don't really need a car, right? So you just basically use Uber as the best way to get around. So it can disrupt those industries as well as rent a car. So if you come to Jamaica now, you don't necessarily rent a car, you just basically use an Uber to get around,
This has been This has been a stimulating conversation, thought-provoking.
That's an excellent point about persons who come here for short stays or business.
Yes.
You see,
Yes.
not just the Uber, right? Another related industry, Airbnb. So they do Airbnb and they come and they rent a car. So like you rightly said, okay, there's a certain risk involved with renting a car and driving around Kingston. So, hey, pass that risk on. Now let's put it on, let's take the Uber. So you budget for that, you come in, you take your Airbnb, you take your Uber, and you're out and your business is done and you're gone. Simplicity, the ease of use is something that you're used to, where you're coming from. So it's really just a different place, same story. So the kind of familiarity will probably drive, like you say, a shift in a related industry. So rental cars, they are probably going to take a beating.
Yes.
Not so sure how well it's going to, how significant it's going to impact car sales, right? I mean, a lot of persons may not rush to finance a vehicle through Uber now, given that it's kind of not legal yet. But if it's here and it's here for sure, then clearly, because I mean, when they get stuck with a car, won't you?
No, but then if a man can own the car through Uber, based on what Linkledln said, if Uber now goes into dealerships, then you have a whole game changer there.
Right. So if it's legal for you to be an Uber driver and that is here to stay, then of course I go and buy 1, 2, or even 3 cars. I'm going to capitalize on it and get 3 cars out there. And same thing that occurs now for the route taxi drivers. You another man just buy 3 cars and put it on the road with Uber stamp.
Yes, indeed. But I can tell you, this is a very thought-provoking.
So as it relates to the comment that was made regarding the rent-a-car business, I'm not sure just how heavily Uber will impact that, and that's based on how the rent-a-car habits and culture works down here. So a lot of the times when people, rent a car, it's for some travel habits that I don't think could be answered by an Uber right now. So people rent cars so they can get around with freedom. And you see, if a Jamaican could get a car, they would rather the car than take the bus or the taxi, right? So if getting cars are easier and more affordable, then that's what we do, because our culture, we like to have our own things.
That's true.
But just to say, as it relates to the rent-a-car business, I'm not sure the extent of the impact that would have in the well, it depends on what side of the country we're talking about, because I'm not sure that it would have debilitating impact on the rent-a-car industry. But I find the view about the acquisition of automobiles interesting. So the used car space might be very interesting to see how that turns out, or how that is impacted by Uber, because the car is now a valued investment and revenue generator. And one of the biggest challenges Uber has right now is availability of that resource in its service area. So it'll be very interesting to see a study on the impact that Uber might have on the used car industry. Yeah, I'd be curious to see what comes of that.
Yep. That's
very
interesting. So there's a lot of opportunities here indeed, and definitely one that demonstrates major play. As you said earlier, I think it's Sheldon who said it earlier, with the telecoms and the digital and cable and wireless, they lost out when you had WhatsApp coming to the market, and you know, it has changed the game forever. Places like the Universal Service Fund, lower income on tariffs. This is now the Airbnb of transportation, which could change the whole local transport. What if as well, let me go even one step further, Trevor, and said you had Uber airline services. I don't know if they're thinking about that yet, you know, but Uber Air and so on. But I haven't seen that yet. I'm just imagining for a moment. Forgive my enthusiasm or youthful exuberance, whichever one you want to call it. But it's definitely been a very thought-provoking conversation this evening on the Caribbean Thought Leadership, indeed.
Sorry, go ahead, Sean.
Yes. Thought-provoking conversation indeed. So between Linkledln, yourself, and Jeff and Ket Joy, we're making some wrap-up comments for the evening and look forward to the book before the year is out and the follow-up session to this one on Uber in a couple of months' time to see where things are moving. But let me get the final words. I see Ket Joyce is Jeff stand up. And Linkledln, you were going to say something, I think, first. And
yeah, but that's quickly. Yeah,
yes.
I'll just finish quickly. So I think one study I'd need to do though from the academic side is look at the old cash is deployed in Jamaica, right? Capital, right? So all of these companies are successful because they had access to capital. And the question is whether Jamaican investors are willing to invest in a tech idea, you know? So if you went to an investor in Jamaica with a Uber type idea a year ago, would they have give you enough money to, you know, blanket the island and take over, you know, the industry there, right? So that's something that we need to understand better. I think there's a lack of risk taking in Jamaica, I think. I mean, risk adverse, you could call it. So definitely would love to see more academic work around that as well.
Interesting. In terms of the investor takeover. I need to probably reach out to the business school at some point here and ask them to take on some of these studies. There's so much in terms of the opportunity here is not for it. So definitely I'll take that point indeed.
Yeah, because the VC community here, you know, in the valley, like they have a famous Sandhill Road not too far from here. They have billions of dollars available there for deployment. And they can, I mean, an investor might say, I have $1 billion to invest. I know 900 million is not going to go anywhere, but the 100 million that I invest in that promising startup is going to make back all of that money, you know, longer term.
Good.
So having that appetite to invest in tech. I mean, people invest in hotels and stuff like that, but they just invest in tech. You know, we want to see why they resist that, you know?
Yes, indeed. That's well, I'm making a lot of notes here. I'm making a lot of notes on this Caribbean Technology Thought Leadership session this Sunday afternoon. Indeed, a lot of research opportunities. I'm taking note, Jeff and Ket Joy.
Yes, I just made a note for research, and I'm thinking about the point before I said. Let me think aloud. Somebody said something about if the legality of Uber, something, I'm paraphrasing, and the first thought that came to me is that when did legality ever stop Jamaicans from doing what they want? The whole idea of companies like Uber who are disruptors, who skirt the laws of countries to get their business done. A research question that pops into my head is how companies like this facilitate the continued flouting of laws and mores and cultures in countries for the sake of profit. So one that came to mind.
Well, you know, the case about
it's a big one.
Self-driving cars and backing out, I guess they would do their homework in terms of whether or not they would be offering financing of motor vehicles in the Jamaican economy. I guess they would check to see if it is something that they could clearly leverage and make some gains on, and may decide to do it for a particular period of time and back out again. But I think they do their homework and see if it will benefit them. If you get more cars on the road and more drivers, hence more revenue for them, they may actually do it for a time, just to stimulate their little, I would say, gray economy. It's gray now.
Yes.
Right? So they could do that to stimulate it, and then, you know, take a decision shortly after once they have achieved their objectives.
Yes. Because if it's not scaling at the pace at which they think it should be scaling, they'll pack up and go, you know. And I foresee in our, especially in our space, we still hold vehicles as an achievement. So owning a vehicle as vis-a-vis getting a ride share, they will still take owning a vehicle because it's still a mark of success in our culture. And there is really and truly, in the essence of it, no difference between a robot taxi and a rideshare. I just sent a message to somebody I know who has a fleet of vehicles on the North Coast. He serves the tourism sector. And I just said to him, put one of the small buses, register one of the small buses for Uber. And he immediately said, the rates are too cheap. Not realizing that, yeah, the rates might be too cheap, but you have to test it because your customer already has an Uber app. So test
that's
it.
a learning point. That's a learning point right there.
This is somebody under 30, right?
What was that, guy?
This is somebody under 30 years old, right?
No.
Yeah, but I mean, clearly he hasn't remembered the lesson that some of us, and not trying to show our ages here, learned with digital and cable and wireless, then cable and wireless.
I think he's complacent because he's successful. So they're not cognizant of what is about in the next few weeks.
Yeah, he's
in the next few weeks.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Things are going to change rapidly in the next few weeks. And that is how quickly the culture will change, our transportation culture, because the people who don't hold cars on a pedestal are visitors that come to the country.
That is correct. That is correct. So Jeff, let me hear your point on this one.
Just a final point we were mentioning before about the rental car industry being disrupted, and Uber. I agree with the other panel that the Uber is probably less likely to disrupt that, but there's a related technology-based sharing program in terms of car sharing that has been very popular, obviously in places like Europe, but also is very complementary to Uber in the sense that you know, there are car sharing programs where you either rent, it's sort of like a, you know, either a timeshare of a vehicle or a small short-term rental of a vehicle. So you could picture down in New Kingston, you know, a row of cars parked that you could, you know, using your app on your phone, you sign up and you get the key and you use it for a period of time. You return it to either that location or one locations that you're allowed to bring it to. Those types of services do exist as well, and they're complementary for, you know, people who have given up their cars for Uber to use for, say, a trip to the country or certain types of shopping trips or whatever else. They are another part of this technology-enabled sharing economy that does warrant looking at, because that will disrupt the traditional car rental market. Because if you make it more affordable, especially given the cultural propensity to want to have an actual car that you can drive to the party or to the event, it may be that those car sharing type services where you're actually renting, you know, on short term, or you have a fractional ownership or something along those lines, are going to be more popular. You know, if you start looking at those in addition to the Uber.
Well, sorry, what's the name of that company you mentioned a while ago? The one that is as popular as Uber?
So there are a number of different ones. They tend to be regional, but I mean, there are a number of them around. There's certainly some regional ones in Canada. There are ones across the US that tend to be, you know, where you show up, you book a car using your phone app, and you use it for a period of time, and then you return it to the spot, and you just pay for the time you use, which is way more convenient than a traditional rental model. Right. And you can also have it where you pre-book a certain amount of that time of that vehicle per month, and you get to use, you know, those minutes or those hours on that vehicle over a course of a month, or on that class of vehicle. So there's a bunch of different you know, businesses that are doing this overseas, and I think that might be another one that you see, you know, in in parallel to what's happening with Uber, those types of services take off as well, because they do feel that there is always a need for a vehicle for certain types of events that Uber doesn't fit well, right? Or a ride sharing program like that doesn't fit well. And I think you may see, as technology enables it, those emerging alongside Uber as opportunities, and they will disrupt the rental car market.
Yeah. And Uber is actually doing rent-a-car now. I think they just launched that service recently, actually.
Okay, interesting. Very interesting conversation here on Caribbean Technology Thought Leadership on a Sunday afternoon. So that was our final point. I think that this has been a riveting conversation. We want to put out the book later this year on this, because I think this is a game changer, not only in a conversation, but in terms of what is likely to be an impact on the market. So I will touch bases with all of you as potential contributors in this one, because you all have a lot of information that I thought made today's session extremely useful and informative. And as we go through a new week, I think the newspaper articles will be coming to ask some more questions of the Jamaican and Caribbean public on this, and diaspora public on this very important question of Uberization, right? The technology disruption to the transportation sector. I am Sean Thorpe, your host for today. My co-host, Dr. Arnett Campbell, and all my colleagues here. I'd like to thank Trevor from CEO of 876 Solutions, Ket Joy, solo entrepreneur, extraordinaire. I'd like to thank Linkledln Morley from Google. I'd like to thank Jeff Warrington from Real Decoy, a multinational company, both here in Jamaica and in Canada. I'd like to thank Sheldon Powell, CEO of Innovate 10X, and my immediate past president of the Jamaica Computer Society. Can't leave that part out. And I'd like to thank, well, Arthur Fidd left earlier, but Arthur Fidd, JCS, president of the New York chapter, and Garrett Webb here, senior manager as well at Huawei, but also a member of chief of my advisory board on the computing and network security degree, just like Art as well. I think this has been an extremely good discussion, very strong set of arguments that were presented today, and things to go and think about. And leaving the conversation, let's see how we can advance the agenda. So any additional thoughts or comments from you, the panel, and from you, the public listening to today's session, I will welcome it. Just drop your comments at the end of the podcast post, and we will be certain to be responding to you at the end. This is a University of Technology Jamaica School of Computing and Information Technology hosted event. It was very good having you again on this Sunday, our 7th session of the Caribbean Technology Thought Leadership. A pleasant good afternoon to you all, and colleagues, I want you to enjoy the rest of your wonderful Sunday as we move into the new week. Thank you so much again.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, and this was a very good session. I'll reach out to you.